Good morning, distinguished delegates. Could you please be seated? I would like to start at morning session today. The fifth meeting of the 57th session of the Commission of Population Development is called to order. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen, as indicated in today's program of work, this meeting of the Commission will be in two parts. The first part will be our multi-stakeholder panel on sub-item B of Agenda Item 3, followed by our interactive debate. The second part at 11:30 a.m. will be the continuation of the general discussion of Agenda Item 3 as a whole. And I now invite the Commission to continue its consideration of sub-item B of Agenda Item 3, entitled Assessing the Status of Implementation of the Program of Action of the International Conference on Population and Development and its contribution to the follow-up and review of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development during the Decade of Action and Delivery for Sustainable Development, in order to hold a multi-stakeholder panel on this session's special theme. And distinguished colleagues, I am pleased to moderate the multi-stakeholder panel on the special themes of the 57th session. Our panelists, representing a range of stakeholders, will present their varied perspective on the achievement and unfulfilled promises of the ICPD Program of Action. We have asked the panelists to consider the interlinkages between demographic dynamics, exercise of individual rights, eradication of poverty and hunger, advancement of gender equality, achievement of sustainable economic growth, and protection of the environment. Their interventions will feature best practices and lessons learned, focusing on recommendations for high-impact policies and programs to achieve sustainable progress in the implementation of the program of action and to maximize its contributions to achieving the sustainable development goals. We will have two rounds of questions for our panelists, followed by our interactive debate. Let me introduce the panelists. From my right-hand side, Mr. Elia Zulu, founder and executive director of the African Institute for Development Policy. And Ms. Silvia Giogli, president of El Colegio de Mexico. And Ms. Shiva Thanetiram, executive director of the Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women. And Ms. Lucy Fergan, on my left-hand side, Social Policy Officer at the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth. Before giving the floor to the panelists, I would like to remind participants that there is no pre-established list of speakers for the panel discussions. Delegations wishing to make comments and pose questions during the subsequent interactive debate are invited to signify by pressing the microphone button. I also take the opportunity to remind participants that the time limit for interventions from the floor is 3 minutes or less. I look forward to our open, constructive, and productive exchange of views. The first round of questions reviews the achievements and challenges in the fulfillment of the ICPD goals. I kindly ask the panelists to keep their answers to no longer than 4 minutes. So my first question is to Mr. Zulu. So I'd like to ask you that from your experience working in Africa, What are the main population and development challenges and opportunities? And what is being done to address these challenges? This is my question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. All protocols observed. I really, as I start, I just want to note that as we celebrate ICPD at 30, it's really time to pause and celebrate the big milestones that Africa and the world has achieved since 1994 in championing sexual and reproductive health and rights for all people. The agenda has really inspired massive changes. I think if you look at the African continent, you look like, unmet need for family planning is going down. Our contraceptive use is increasing. Actually, if you look at analysis done recently, 9 out of the 10 countries with the highest rates of contraceptive increase in the last decade actually are located in Africa. More girls are staying in school. Teen pregnancies, though declining slowly, there's still progress in all those areas. So I think all the efforts that the international community has put in since 1994 is working. When you get to the question, what are really the key population and development challenges and opportunities, when you look at Africa, you really have to note that it's the phenomenal changes that the African continent is undergoing and the policy responses to these changes that would determine whether the relationship between population and development is a challenge or an opportunity. We know that when you look at past population projections and the future, Africa now having 1.5 billion people, Africa is going to add another billion people in the next, 26 years to 2050. This big increase in the population can turn the continent into a formidable economic and geopolitical force by providing a critical mass of skilled youthful workers and a big economic market if the right strategic investments are made. And we know that if the birth rates are going to continue as projected and even accelerate faster through universal access to family planning, keeping girls in school, and continued reduction in child mortality, Africa will have this boom of workers that can accelerate economic growth through the demographic dividend. In my view, there are two big elephants if you really have to see whether Africa will optimize its population dynamics for socioeconomic transformation through the demographic dividend. The first question is, can the continent make the required investments to turn its youthful population into quality human capital comprising well-educated, skilled people who can drive innovation in the 21st century global market? And the second one is, can the continent's economies generate mass decent jobs and livelihoods that will create that purchasing power that the big population will provide and make Africa's economy globally competitive? The big question really is, where will the African jobs come from? Is it through industrialization? Is it the service sector and so on? And I think there's no doubt that if these two elephants are not addressed, the continent risks missing out on the demographic dividend and face the other side of the coin, where there will be more problems on the continent and so on. Already rapid population growth is exerting a lot of pressure on the country's capacity to improve education, quality of education, let alone just sustaining the current levels. So really the main issue when you look at the relationship between population and development in Africa is really to emphasize that there's urgency to act. That there's urgency, you can't wish away these big numbers. I mean, Africa is now 19% of the global population. 2050, it will be a quarter. 1 in 4 people in the world will be Africans. So the question that we all have to ask ourselves is, if Africa has problems, the problems will not be only African problems, they will be global problems. So what do we need to do? There's urgency to really make big investments in Africa to make sure that the African population is well equipped to play its role in driving socioeconomic transformation and sustainable development, not only in Africa, but even globally. We already know that the slow transition from subsistence agriculture to what you might call climate resilient agriculture, that will help to really make sure that there's a food security in Africa. That will make sure that there are robust livelihoods that people can follow. And the interconnectedness of these issues, climate change now coming in, these global conflicts, and so on, and you look at population, sexual reproductive health, and so on, means that the approaches to optimize the relationship between population and development in Africa has to use cross-sectoral integrated approaches and systems thinking, because you can't work in silos and think that you address these issues in a comprehensive manner. There's also another big change that is happening in Africa as far as population is concerned. It's urbanization. By 2032, for the first time, there will be more people living in urban areas in Africa than in rural areas. We know urbanization has been a transformational factor in the developed countries, in the emerging societies. Will Africa take advantage of this phenomenon to actually drive socioeconomic transformation? The results so far since 1994 are that it's a mixed bag. Yes, urbanization is happening. There are some countries in North Africa and the southern tip of Africa where a lot of demographic changes have happened, and they have taken advantage of some sort of demographic dividend has already been recorded there, and urbanization has also worked very, very well. But for urbanization to be this important factor for Africa's development, it has to be well planned for. It has to have the economic infrastructure that will let the young people, the relatively young people in urban areas, drive the socioeconomic transformation, innovation, and so on. It's good that when you look at the ICPD and SDG agenda, because there's a lot of overlap between the two, that there's progress really going on. But also, I think there's a wide acceptance. There was last year at UNGA, there was an assessment of the SDGs, and the conclusion was that in many of the human capital-related SDGs, progress is very inadequate, and Africa and many of the developing countries will actually not achieve the SDGs. So, yes, when we talk about Africa, let's not talk like Africa is one country. It's a divergent country. It's a divergent continent. Those North African countries, Southern Africa, most of Central and West Africa, really are having a lot of challenges regarding child marriages, regarding contraceptive use, but I think the thing is that progress is being made across the board. So the considerable diversity, demographic diversity, the diversity in the ICPD indicators across Africa actually provides a big opportunity for learning, cross-country learning within the continent itself, because there are some countries that have gone ahead in addressing some of these issues, while others may not have, are struggling with other issues, even within country, within the regions, across the regions. The diversity is a big plus that provides learning opportunities. That's why platforms like the CPD, all these platforms looking at where countries are coming together are very, very important to reinforce our learning as we go forward. So another key thing that I want to note here is really the fact that what the ICPD has inspired a lot across Africa is really the development of various policies, whether it's on gender-based violence, on protecting young people, marriage, making sure that minimum age at marriage, at least on paper, at the legal level, is protected. There's been a very, very big progress there. Population, reproductive health policies, family planning, and so on. But I think one of the key differences really is the extent to which we are implementing these policies. A good example is the demographic dividend. I was listening yesterday almost every country speaking here is talking about what we are doing to harness the demographic dividend. But I think I can ask the question, in 2017, the African Union designated harnessing the demographic dividend through investments in youth as the top development theme for the year, but also for the next decade. We are virtually now, 3-4 years to 2027. The question we need to ask ourselves is the demographic dividend concept just at a rhetoric level, or are we actually operationalizing it? And what does operationalization mean? It means basically not just saying, oh, the demographic dividend is in our development plan, or we included this in our 5-year strategy and so on. It has to be integrated at planning, budgeting levels, because that's where the shifts that need to happen are going to be operationalized from. So I want to challenge all the countries here to really reflect on 2017, reflect on this decade, and ask ourselves the question, to what extent are we walking the talk on these important parameters that we are agreeing on? And I think finally, I just want to note that I mentioned this at the beginning, the investment that Africa needs to turn its population into this, quality human capital is huge. It might be to the level of the Marshall Plan investment that was done to rebuild Europe after the Second World War. Is the world ready to work with Africa to turn Africa into really a partner rather than a continent that is just looking for aid and so on? And I think the biggest resource beyond the minerals and so on has to be the people that Africa has for the continent and for the whole global community. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Zulu for your comprehensive insight from Africa, and I can remember the big contribution from African colleagues during the negotiation for the outcome document, and thank you very much. And this is, as a chair, as a moderator, I need to share the soft reminder to the panelists that your time limit is 4 minutes, so please respect the time limits. Right. Thank you very much. So next I turn to Ms. Jogli from Mexico. I would like to ask you the question, from your perspective, what are some of the key aspects of the ICPD program of action for which progress must be accelerated?
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes. Quisiera empezar por decir que es un honor para mí estar aquí, que creo que justamente este aniversario número 30 del programa del Cairo amerita como un corte de caja evaluar qué es lo que ha pasado. En estos días hemos oído las participaciones de varios países que reportan avances en indicadores, lo acabamos de oír también del señor Zulu, pero creo que una de las principales deudas es con la disminución de las desigualdades, lo cual también está alineado con la Agenda 2030. ¿Podemos acelerar la disminución de las brechas? ¿Cuáles son los obstáculos que no nos permiten avanzar más rápidamente en la disminución de la desigualdad? ¿Y cómo procesos emergentes interactúan con la dinámica demográfica y generan nuevas desigualdades que debemos considerar en la construcción de la resiliencia demográfica? Por supuesto que tenemos un punto de partida sólido, que es el reiterado acuerdo del enfoque centrado en las personas y la reiteración de la importancia de invertir para reducir las desigualdades de género como indispensables para promover el desarrollo, incluida, por supuesto, la inversión en salud sexual y reproductiva. Entonces voy a dar algunas ideas a qué me refiero cuando hablo de estos obstáculos o estos procesos. Uno es que seguimos con desigualdades preexistentes que interactúan con la Agenda del Cairo. Dos ejemplos muy claros: los rezagos en mortalidad y morbilidad materna por causas prevenibles, en donde podríamos apuntar con mayor énfasis el objetivo de erradicar la mortalidad y morbilidad materna por causas prevenibles. Otro, por ejemplo, el embarazo infantil, el embarazo de niñas de 10 a 14 años, que de acuerdo a datos del UNFPA suma 500,000 anualmente. Estas desigualdades preexistentes conviven con nuevas fuentes de desigualdades y vulnerabilidades. Por ejemplo, sabemos que los impactos del cambio climático son diferenciados entre poblaciones, que las poblaciones tienen diferentes recursos para enfrentar y adaptarse al cambio climático. Por ejemplo, interactúa con la estructura por edades, cuestiones como las olas de calor que tienen un mayor impacto en la población de adultos mayores, o diferencias entre hombres y mujeres en la forma en la que responden a eventos naturales que acaban siendo catastróficos. Otro de los retos en estas nuevas desigualdades tienen que ver, por ejemplo, con el acceso a tecnología. Sabemos, y la pandemia nos dejó claro, que el acceso a tecnología genera diferencias en educación y en la formación para el mundo de trabajo. También sabemos que está relacionada con nuevas formas de violencia, incluido de violencia de género, pero también sabemos que tiene grandes potencialidades por lo que puede aportar en varias de las dimensiones que tocan la Agenda del Cairo. El otro aspecto tendría que ver con esta reflexión sobre los obstáculos, el contexto institucional y el obstáculo para avanzar con mayor velocidad en la implementación del programa del Cairo. Por ejemplo, en muchos de los contextos de nuestros países persisten contextos de violencia social, de guerras, de conflictos políticos, un aumento de las actividades del crimen organizado que se viven de manera cotidiana y que por supuesto afectan el Estado de Derecho y generan desigualdades en el acceso a la justicia. Creo que hoy nos queda claro que necesitamos instituciones sólidas para obtener avances sostenibles en la agenda de desarrollo, pero también para erradicar todas las violencias, incluyendo las de género. Otro tema que quisiera tocar cuando hablamos de desigualdades, y me da mucho gusto porque el señor Elijah Zulu lo tocó, tiene que ver con la interacción entre dinámica demográfica y mercados de trabajo, cómo el cambio en la estructura por edades está llevando a retos que implican una reorganización social, un cambio en el contrato social, entender cómo se está moviendo el mundo del trabajo y que nos llevaría a hablar de manera más específica aspectos como la solidaridad intergeneracional a la que se ha hecho referencia en estos 2 días. Creo que ahí el tema de cuidados, los trabajos, los cuidados, la economía en cuidados es un punto central que puede articular esta discusión desde la perspectiva de la conciliación entre la vida familiar y la conciliación entre el mundo del trabajo. Y la última idea tiene que ver con esta parte que es el primer punto del programa del Cairo de 1994, que es la integración de la población y de la dinámica demográfica de manera transsectorial en la agenda de desarrollo, esta construcción de resiliencia demográfica que nos lleva a hablar y seguir trabajando en la necesidad de datos confiables, desagregados, que nos permitan informar también decisiones a nivel subnacional, pero sobre todo que nos sirvan para la toma de decisiones basadas en evidencia y no en miedo o en prenociones. Esa sería mi intervención. Gracias, Mr. Chair.
Muchas gracias, Ms. Gioglini. Thank you very much. And I next turn to Ms. Thanetilan. I would like to ask you the question. And what are some of the biggest challenges facing girls and women today that threaten achievement of gender equity and equality? This is my question.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Kita. And I think I want to echo what Elia said earlier, that, ICPD 30 is a powerful reminder, of the relevance of the program of action for all of us in the global south, because many of the countries in the Asia-Pacific region have actually utilized the ICPD program of action of Cairo as a roadmap to achieving, a higher developed status within our own countries. And definitely, one of the things that I'm reminded is that the ICPD program of action still today continues to be such a comprehensive outlook, on the issue of people and citizens at country level, and looks at the intersections of different sorts of development issues as well. And it was, again, this August House, you reaffirmed the relevance of the program of action at the 20th anniversary at the UNGA in September 2019. And then you also, at the same time, again, mentioned the ICPD program of action within the SDGs on gender equality, right? So the relevance of the ICPD program of action continues to be reiterated through many, many levels of the United Nations. So, of course, we are not living in the same type of world of the early 90s conference documents. And today we can say that some of these huge mega trends are really kind of affecting and some of the biggest challenges facing, gender equality and gender equity, right? And the first I would like to mention is, of course, climate change, where actually if we look at the map of poverty and vulnerability to climate change, we will find that the poorest communities are living in the most climate vulnerable areas. At the same time, these communities are the ones that already have less access to sexual and reproductive health services, and the climate vulnerability actually increases care work of women because women have to walk further to fetch water and wood. Girls have to drop out of school in order to carry that care burden within the household. And also we are finding that there are some communities who are now resorting back to early age marriage in order to protect that their families do not drop further into poverty, right? And as a measure of safeguard for the girls. The second, of course, another big challenge is the global economic setbacks that we have seen, especially, the inability of the global economy to recover before the pandemic levels, and the changing notions of poverty, where we are seeing a lot of middle-class people kind of drop down, so downward social mobility, and this and fewer social protection nets to prevent downward social mobility, and definitely women and girls are the ones who are most affected by this. The third is that global health challenges, and we are seeing that post-pandemic, there's a great increase in mental health. There's decreased resourcing for health systems, which mean that poorer and more marginalized groups and communities are falling through the cracks. And investment in social systems of education and health, especially for women and girls, whose access to resources are less within the family and they're less within communities, right? So this, decreased resourcing of health systems and education systems affects women and girls the most. The fourth is, of course, the continuing and persistent challenges in fulfilling the human rights of women and girls in all our diversity, which perpetuates life situations of early pregnancy, repeat pregnancy, mortality and morbidity outcomes, as well as violence, often resulting in lesser education, lesser ability to harness economic opportunity due to gender burdens both in the formal and in the informal labor markets or the small business arenas. Bodily autonomy and bodily integrity become the linchpin to ensuring that women and girls in all our diversity are able to have a chance at a decent future. Lastly, of course, it would be completely remiss of me to say that global political instability that we have seen in the last few years, in which, aggressor nations are continually bringing towards all of us the threat of war, right? And this is completely detrimental to the rights of women and girls everywhere. And that the inability of august houses like the United Nations to kind of put an end to the incessant attacks on the Palestinian people. So we are seen to be completely helpless in this situation of chaos. And this is definitely when the human rights of people in conflict areas are affected, all of our human rights are actually at stake. So I would say that these are some of those challenges that we see.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sanentram. Thank you very much for your insightful comment, especially on the I really inspired by the vulnerable population affected after the COVID-19. Thank you very much for your comment. And now I would like to turn to Ms. Fagan. The last question in round one is addressed to you. And since the adoption of the ICPD program of action 30 years ago, multiple generations of youth have grown from childhood to adulthood. And what issues have improved for youth, and what remains to be done to fulfill the promise of ICPD? This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So my name's Lucy. I'm a young SRHR advocate, but I'm also a medical doctor. So I've seen the transformative power of health, of rights, of choices, not only for my peers, for fellow young people, but also for my community and for the people that I see day to day in my clinical work. And I just wanted to start by acknowledging that for us as young people, the ICPD program of action represents the promise that was made before we were born. So this promise, a commitment to upholding our rights, our choices, and equity, it might feel like it was a long time ago, but actually, when we look at it as young people, it feels as relevant today as it ever was. But in a world in polycrisis, and where we see our rights challenged and undermined in increasingly complex ways, I feel like we must not only take this moment to celebrate our successes, of which we do have many, but also to reflect on the things that are holding us back, and to take bolder and more decisive action for progress. Since Cairo, young people have stepped up and stepped forward to lead the ICPD program of action. And I feel like the prioritization of their unique needs and their realities has increased, in turn resulting in greater implementation of the ICPD program of action. We've seen declining rates of child marriage, we've seen increasing numbers of young people able to stay in school, and we've seen expanded access to family planning, such as increased access to contraception. But progress is stalling. We see this in the day-to-days of our own realities, we see it in our national politics, and we see it in the global system. And this is not just progress in our own countries, but we see it within and amongst and between countries. Those inequalities are widening, and we see uneven and fragile progress. We've also recognized and witnessed, particularly as civil society and young people, how the rights that we fought for over the last 30 years and the progress we've collectively made here today can so easily be lost, deprioritized, deinvested, and dismissed. So in the face of growing anti-rights and anti-gender narratives, in the face of backlash and opposition, I want to call on countries here, and our civil society allies in the room, of course, to stand strong and to recommit to the spirit of Cairo, with the progressive realization of rights for all. The complex social, environmental, and economic challenges that we face can't be an excuse. They can't be an excuse for backsliding on our rights and choices. Now, more than ever, we need transformational leadership. We need you to be bold, and we need to actually work across communities, across regions, and across generations, so also with young people, to bring the ICPD to life. Young people are clear. There is a need to really recenter conversations around sexual and reproductive justice, from eradicating gender-based violence and harmful practices, through to ensuring that every young person, including youth with disabilities and youth from marginalized communities, have access to the information, the services, and the care that they need to make decisions over their own bodies and their own futures. At the same time, we need to ensure that the ICPD program of action responds to the emerging issues that face young people today. Many things that really are new barriers, new challenges for us that weren't there 30 years ago. So the growing mental health crisis, the spread of disinformation and misinformation, and finding ways to navigate our safety and our rights in these new, sometimes unregulated online spaces. And then finally, we need to unlock more investment and more financing, especially for youth-led organizations who play a critical role in advancing the ICPD agenda within their communities. So invest in us and our movements, amplify our voices, and stand in solidarity with us in the fight for rights and justice. Adolescents and young people are the torchbearers of the next 30 years of the ICPD program of action, hopefully 30 years where we'll see lots of progress. So empower us, and together we will fulfill the ICPD promise. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fargan, for your insightful comment. And now I would like to proceed to the second round of questions. And I'd like to ask our panelists to focus on the further implementation of the ICPD program of action and its contributions to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I ask the panelists to please keep your answers for this round no longer than 3 minutes. Sorry for really short. But and now I turn to Ms. Fargan again. And my question is that what are the critical policies and interventions you would recommend to improve health, including sexual and reproductive health of young men and women, and promoting synergy between advancing the goals of the ICPD and achievement of SDG 3? How can youth be included in the design of these approaches? This is my question.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm really excited actually to share that just a few weeks ago in Benin, hundreds of young people came together to reimagine the ICPD program of action and to think about what a new youth-led roadmap for ICPD could look like. This roadmap is outlined in the Continental Youth Action Agenda, which we officially launched here yesterday, right here at CPD. And I really invite you to look at that because it provides young people's aspirations, their vision, but also their actionable recommendations for the steps we need to take as a global community. In particular, young people talking about SRHR and health called for the elimination of all legal, structural, financial, and systemic barriers such as out-of-pocket expenditure, third-party consent, and criminalization of abortion. We also need to expand access to high-quality CSE for young people in and out of school and ensure that age of consent laws do not deprive adolescents and young people of access to the essential SRH services and information that they need. I want to reflect on UHC for a minute because UHC is a crucial catalyst for social protection, for health and well-being, and for development. As young people, we were disappointed by last year's political declaration on UHC that did not even meet the level of ambition and commitment of 2019. Young people, especially those in the global south, continue to be shut out from universal health coverage due to regressive policies and programming, including criminalization of sex work, restrictive age of consent laws, and services that are not equipped to meet their needs. With the focus on health at next year's CPD, we need to be bold, do better, and ensure that we invest in inclusive and rights-based UHC for ICPD. We also need to strengthen meaningful youth engagement in all aspects of the ICPD program of action. We look to you to actually prevent the tokenization of youth movements by external actors and instead create meaningful opportunities for the full, active, equal, and meaningful participation of young people in all their diversity in the spaces related to the ICPD program of action, including here at the Commission on Population and Development. And finally, with 20 weeks to go to the Summit of the Future, hope nobody's panicking just yet, we as young people urge you to push for really strong references to the ICPD program of action and SRHR within the summit and its outcomes, including the Pact for the Future and the Declaration on Future Generations. This year is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to renew the ICPD promise, but even more importantly, to make it a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Fargan. I also got some excited news from Benin, from the participants, of my colleagues. And now I would like to ask the question to Ms. Sanentlam. So how can we best achieve a reduction of inequality and ensure that no one is left behind when advancing the goals of the ICPD and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development?
Thank you, Mr. Kita, for this very important question. I think that 30 years post the ICPD, one of the things that I know that the feminist movement has come up with is that feminists want systems change, right? Because we no longer only want the policies to be written on paper, but we want to realize our rights when we are interacting with either the health systems or the education systems. So systems change is necessary to recognize and fulfill the rights of women and girls in all our diversity, especially in fulfilling sexual and reproductive health and rights. Younger women, adolescents, poorer women, women from racial and religious minorities are very often unable to access due to legal, economic, geographic, or social barriers. And even when they get to the facility, are either turned away or have poorer or adverse outcomes due to systemic barriers. Health is a great social leveler in our society, and good health is an asset to an individual, which governments can give to each and every one of our citizens to ensure that we can participate fully in the economic, political, social, and cultural life of our country. Second is to respect, recognize, and fulfill bodily autonomy and bodily integrity of women and girls in all our diversity. Unfortunately for the female sex, body becomes one's destiny. And because the bodies of women are vulnerable to pregnancy, to violence due to gender power imbalances at the family level and at the community level, this becomes the cracks within which women and girls fall through. Vulnerable and marginalized women and girls need critical sexual and reproductive health service such as HIV prophylaxis, emergency contraception, modern methods of contraception, and safe abortion services. And we are routinely denied these services either due to age, marital status, poverty, educational status, or minority status within our country. Hence, the vulnerable become or are made more vulnerable and are further marginalized by the very systems and institutions and policies which are meant to empower them and build them and serve them. The last, of course, I'd like to say is now is about the time to design for inclusion, right, within the systems. There is a tendency to operate for building for the majority. However, when we design for inclusion, it also includes the majority. For example, technologies that we use today, every day, such as voice messages, closed captioning, these were designed for persons with disability, but now all of us use it, right? So we sometimes, people tend to think of inclusivity, oh, we have to include all of these marginalized groups. It means that as though we're taking this cake and breaking it up into smaller pieces, right? So everyone is left with a smaller piece. But that is not true, because when we design for inclusion, this is one way of creating that bigger economic pie, or that bigger pie for all of us to have a part of. So I think that it's really important that when systems are designed for inclusivity, they are better designed for all of us.
Thank you very much for your comment. And I now turn to Ms. Giogli, and I would like to ask you that how can the effective implementation of the ICPD program of action be leveraged as a catalyst for advancing human rights within the broader framework of sustainable development? And you may reflect on your work related to migration governance and migrant rights. I would like to have your comment.
Muchas gracias, Mr. Chair. Bueno, pues migración es un tema candente en la agenda internacional y es un tema que va a estar en la agenda internacional por un buen rato y que requiere una perspectiva global. Entonces, para esta pregunta, lo que yo me preguntaba es ¿cuál es la contribución que desde la perspectiva del Programa de Acción del Cairo y desde la Agenda de Población y Desarrollo podemos hacer a la discusión sobre gobernanza de migración internacional? Porque estoy convencida que el Programa de Acción del Cairo es una caja de herramientas alineada con la Agenda 2030, al igual que para el caso de América Latina, el Consenso de Montevideo, que cumplió también 10 años. Y creo que hay tres aspectos que se alinean o que abonan a la discusión general. Una es el principio de enfoques de derechos con las personas al centro, que se incorpora en otros instrumentos internacionales como el Pacto Global por una Migración Segura, Ordenada y Regular. La segunda tiene que ver con cómo la movilidad de las personas interactúa con la dinámica demográfica, y creo que ahí tenemos mucho que aportar desde el marco de esta conferencia. Y lo tercero, cómo estas formas de movilidad interactúan con las desigualdades que estamos observando. Hay varios aspectos de lo que estamos viendo al día de hoy, en términos, por ejemplo, del perfil sociodemográfico de las migraciones más recientes. Vemos cambios muy acelerados de un año a otro en el tamaño de los flujos, en la dirección de los flujos. Tenemos países que eran tradicionalmente de recepción de migrantes y ahora son origen de migrantes, como sería el caso de Venezuela. Tenemos flujos de norte a sur que se ven en la migración de retorno, o ahora hay mayor visibilidad también para ver los flujos sur-sur. Tenemos cambios en los perfiles. Estábamos acostumbrados, sobre todo en el caso de América Latina, a la migración de adultos solos, y ahora tenemos familias y cada vez más menores que viajan en los flujos, en muchos casos menores de 15 años viajando solos. Y tenemos una mezcla de razones de la migración. Se mezclan las razones económicas, laborales, que huyen de la violencia, que huyen de situaciones de vulnerabilidad por el cambio climático. Y creo que en este contexto que cambia tan rápidamente, uno de los problemas es que hay un desfase en términos de los mecanismos de gobernanza. Se dan cambios en la normatividad o cambios institucionales insuficientes e ineficientes para la rapidez con la que se están dando los procesos migratorios. Aún así, creo que hay varios aspectos en los que se ha avanzado en la gobernanza de la migración. La responsabilidad compartida no es algo que se pueda ver solo desde la perspectiva nacional. La necesidad de combinar el manejo urgente y protección de los derechos humanos con temas como la inclusión de los migrantes una vez que llegan a los lugares de destino, y también la visibilización de la contribución de los migrantes en los países tanto de origen como en los países de destino. Y creo que ahí, otra vez alineado con la Agenda 2030 y con el programa de Acción del Cairo, está el tema del reto de incluir y anticiparnos a las nuevas expresiones de la desigualdad asociadas a la migración. Tenemos, y es muy fácil identificar, poblaciones más vulnerables, la vulnerabilidad en el acceso a servicios de educación, el acceso a vivienda, el acceso a trabajo, por supuesto el acceso a salud y el acceso a salud sexual y reproductiva de mujeres y niñas que están en los flujos migratorios. Y bueno, yo creo que hay otra de las contribuciones desde la perspectiva del programa de acción es la posibilidad de dar evidencia, información para la toma de decisiones en un tema en donde hay mucha desinformación y mucha politización. Esa sería mi contribución. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Ms. Jogli. Thank you very much for your insightful comment. This is really priceless comment for, especially on my country, which already started about the migration. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to turn to Mr. Zulu. So I'd like to ask you that in the face of global challenges such as climate change and food insecurity, conflicts and pandemics, and how can the implementation of the ICPD program of action be adapted to address the emerging issues and build resilience in the population?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think the very fact that there are all these global changes taking place, whether it's now climate change becoming so prominent, food insecurity, pandemics, conflict, and so on, demonstrates why the ICPD agenda has to be alive. We can't really, I think the concept of unfinished business, we have to accept that the business will always be unfinished because there are new issues that are coming up. We can't sit back. There will be, I think the point was made that the growing conservatism around the world means that there will be a lot of effort to fight back on the rights that even reverse back the progress that has been made. So sexual reproductive health and rights are in every society. They should be a going concern. So we can't reach a point where we clap our hands and say we've reached where we needed to go. But also, as these other big issues are coming up, climate change, food insecurity, and so on, it's very, very important that the ICPD fraternity, doesn't just get stuck to our own spaces, that we go beyond what I might call preaching to the choir, to reach out more to the other sectors and create champions of the ICPD agenda in the other sectors as well. For instance, right now there's this big push to make health a central issue in global climate change and national climate change discourses. A lot of this is being done by the World Health Organization, by actors who actually follow the One Health principle of trying to integrate between people, the environment, animals' health, and people's health, and so on. I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, where are we in these debates? Because health might be in climate discourses, but we might find out that SRHR is not really prioritized in those spaces. So we need to play a role in all these spaces. There's also, I mentioned the point about funding for the ICPD agenda. I think we all know that there are a lot of struggles that we go through, whether it's at global or at national level, even within our ministries of finance and so on, to get funding for even family planning and so on. A lot of the family planning programs are being funded by, by the global community when countries are not putting in a lot of money. So when you ask the question, where would the money come from? As these other big issues come in, COVID, we saw, priorities changed completely. We have to continue making the case, using evidence and persuasion that the ICPD agenda is critical for achieving sustainable development goals. And when you talk about funding, one of the big issues that is affecting a lot of our countries, especially in Africa, is the debt burden. The impact of these global conflicts that are happening are that, a lot of countries are facing massive devaluations of their currencies, which is quadrupling and just multiplying the debt that they have. And as a result, there's no money for them to use for development, let alone address the ICPD agenda. So where are we in all this? Are we going to sit back, or when we talk about debt relief, are we going to be part of the fraternity to try to say for countries really to be able to invest in people? There has to be money there. You can't keep paying these debts, a lot of which are even given without due proper analysis of what the value of this aid is going to be for the countries. So really my main issue here, Mr. Chair, is to emphasize the fact that the ICPD agenda is a going concern. It will always be that. There are people who are fighting their rights. We have to continue making the advocacy and making the case from an economic point of view as well. And more critically, we have to make sure that we go beyond our own silos to create champions in climate change, in conservation, because at the end of the day, we can't achieve sustainable development if we don't really invest in people as articulated in the ICPD agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zulu, for your comment. And your comment reminds me of the importance of how we need to keep the discussion on the financing of debt relief in New York. Thank you very much. And now I would like to proceed to the interactive debate. And I now invite delegations wishing to make comments and pose questions to the panelists to signify by pressing the microphone button. Now, I would like to give the floor to Her Excellency Sefeli Dinenda, Deputy Minister of Health and Social Protection of Albania. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, esteemed delegates. Today here at the 57th session of the Commission on Population and Development, we are focusing on the crucial interlinkages among gender, health and sexual reproductive health and rights, and development in Albania. Development, like the rest of our region and beyond, is not an easy path. However, we are addressing and doing our best to deal with all of these development challenges. The pace and direction of demographic change have never been so different across countries. While the median age in Albania has increased from 33 in 2011 to 38, while from high fertility to fertility level below replacement, while like the rest of Western Balkans, Europe and the world, we observe these changes and global anxieties, and we are committed to make and build a better life for our people where their universal human rights are ensured and no one is left behind. In response to anxieties about demographic changes, we are looking into solutions that are long-term, sustainable, and support acceleration of women's rights to reproductive decision-making and bodily autonomy. This, in the case of Albania, has meant investment to provide universal access to quality reproductive health services, including infertility services, and actions to address the many other issues that determine choices about childbearing. Examples include paid leave, providing child benefit as a universal policy, flexible working hours. As people live longer, we are working to ensure systems are in place to support healthy and active aging and promote solidarity between generations. Our guiding principle, the National Strategy for Development and Integration, emphasizes inclusivity and fairness across society, covering areas from healthcare and education to gender equality and social welfare. We are committed to count for every member of our population and to ensure that, again, no one is left behind. Inspired by the European Union Gender Equality Strategy 2020-2025, Albania is tackling gender-based violence, stereotypes, and disparities in the job market. As we work towards European Union accession, our rule of law roadmap outlines key reforms, especially in advancing gender equality, a crucial part of our negotiation process. Most important, the gender equal policies are also closely linked with a number of population choices. Policies such as fertility increase, sexual and reproductive health and rights, as well as improvements in social care for aging, just to name a few. We understand that investing in youth, education, integrated and long-term care for our older persons, and gender equality isn't just the right thing to do, but it's a fundamental human right. Poverty especially holds back women's progress, so we are dedicated to addressing its root causes to move forward with the ICPD plan of action and beyond. Our commitment to women's empowerment goes beyond words. We've made concrete changes like updating laws to align with international standards and implementing gender-responsive budgeting, but challenges remain, such as stereotypes, economic disparities, and gender-based violence, hindering progress for women and girls. In conclusion, we reaffirm our dedication to the ICPD Program of Action as a key to achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030. By prioritizing policies informed by population needs and focusing on access to family planning and sexual and reproductive health and rights, we can build a more equitable and prosperous future for all. Thank you for your attention and unwavering support for population and development.
I thank the Deputy Minister of Health and Social Protection of Albania, and I would like to make a comment on the on the time limits. So please be reminded that the time limit for intervention is 3 minutes or less. I thank you for your cooperation, and I now give the floor to the representative of United Kingdom, followed by Serbia and Kenya. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the distinguished panelists for sharing their valuable assessment of the implementation of the ICPD Programme of Action. Chair, as the panelists have set out, there is much progress to celebrate since Cairo, and I'm glad we have time to highlight those successes. I am proud to be here at CPD as a young woman from the UK. I would not be here without the work of the women who have come before me, and I'm glad to continue to represent the voices of girls and youth here today. I thank Lucy for her comments surrounding youth, in particular related to the Programme of Action. And I would like to continue to draw attention during this panel discussion to adolescence. Adolescence is a short but critical window where life trajectories are set, particularly for young girls. It is at this point when many girls face increased risks of gender-based violence, including sexual violence, limited access to safe abortion, and are exposed to harmful practices, including child marriage and female genital mutilation, events that will change the course of their life forever. Period pain, lack of affordable sanitary supplies, and safe and clean hygiene facilities in school, as well as stigma and shame, reduce the concentration and self-esteem levels of girls in schools around the world. Many of these factors force girls out of education and trap them in poverty cycles. It is tragic that most of these issues are preventable and avoidable. However, young girls face specific barriers in accessing health information and services, including sexual and reproductive health services and comprehensive sexuality education. Only young people know their own realities and need to be part of the conversation and the solutions. I have been delighted to see so many youth delegates at CPD this week, working alongside and with their governments to help create solutions and push for change. But that space needs to be made for us, and our voices need to be listened to. We have a fundamental right to actively and meaningfully engage in all matters that affect our lives and communities. Today, I ask the governments present to ensure meaningful and safe youth participation, providing young people with the space, access, and opportunities to be part of decision-making. This includes financing sexual and reproductive health and rights for young people, especially education and services. I ask all the panel, in your expert opinion, how can the programme of action be better adapted to address the barriers that, as Lucy pointed out, young people, in particular young girls, are facing, so that we can have control over our bodies and our future and make informed choices on all aspects of our lives. Thank you.
I thank the representative of United Kingdom, and now I give the floor to the representative of Serbia, followed by Kenya and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Serbia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, and your excellencies. In line with the program of action of ICPD as well as Agenda 2030, the Republic of Serbia introduced a new approach for responding to the aging population issue. The previous focus, which was on persons over 65 years of age, has been now shifted to all generations, which pass through different stages in aging process and have their own specific needs. In this regard, and in cooperation with the UNFPA, in 2023, the Serbian government adopted the strategy of active and healthy aging for the period of 2024 to 2030. The strategy is defined in accordance with the latest document of the European Commission, namely Demographic Change in Europe and Toolbox for Action, which represents a new concept of society's longevity in terms of the design of the demographic instrument consisting of 4 pillars, one of which refers to older people. The main objectives of the strategy are addressed to the inclusion of all generations in an aging process based on the principle of intergenerational solidarity, provision of lifelong learning programs, strengthening volunteer activities while respecting the principle of gender equality, improvement of institutional protection of members of all generations, prevention of violence, caregiving. Let me conclude by saying that achieving an integrated, holistic approach to healthy and active aging requires the coordinated functioning of all component state bodies or multi-sectoral approach in order to create a broader framework for effective social action in relation to aging as a process, old age as a result of that process, and older persons as a population group. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the representative of Serbia, and I now give the floor to the representative of Kenya, followed by Bosnia and Herzegovina and ACT Alliance. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, I want to thank the panelists for the very insightful briefings and updates. Kenya has diligently pursued the implementation of the International Conference on Population and Development Program of Action aimed at fostering, among others, safe, regular, and orderly international migration and family promotion and protection as a significant areas that require increased global attention. In the spirit of partnership as enshrined in the Global Compact on migration, the government has put in place key policies and legislative initiatives towards supporting international migration and development. Kenya is a host and a sanctuary for 7,444 people, refugees, and asylum seekers as a result of the conflict and climate-induced impacts. Children aged 0 to 17 years constitute 52% of this population. The whole of government approach in handling migration governance has culminated in reaping from the benefits that comes with international migration, which already is spurring development in various parts of the country. Mr. Chair, to harness and utilize the skills and the potential that comes with this category of migrants, the government is developing a Marshall Plan, Christine Shirika Plan, that's a Swahili word. This plan intends to integrate the refugees population to participate in socio-economic development activities for them to improve their own lives and equally contribute to the development of Kenya. Notwithstanding, Kenya experiencing strain on resources and infrastructure in managing refugees camps and security challenges, including cross-border crimes, human trafficking, and terrorism. Kenya recommends strengthening of international cooperation, including burden sharing among countries to facilitate integration, voluntary repatriation, funding for crucial refugee services, and secure movement of people and goods. Mr. Chair, on family well-being of individuals and societies, the government has put in place policies and strategies. Key among them is the formulation and implementation of the family protection and promotion policy, which provides guidelines under which the family institution is protected. As a result, the government has put in place social protection programs targeting vulnerable population. This has realized a remarkable increase in the number of beneficiaries households from 522,000 in 2017 to 1.1 million in 2023 under the government cash transfer program, popularly known as Inua Jamii. Increased strains on scarce administrative resources present challenges threatening sustainability of these social protection programs. Kenya urges for increased international cooperation and resource mobilization, including debt relief, to free up resources needed towards accelerating the implementation of our interlinked population and development agenda. I thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kenya. I now give the floor to the representative of Bosnia and Herzegovina, followed by ACT Alliance and Cuba. Bosnia and Herzegovina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like to thank all the panelists for their contribution in our shared goals. We all know that there is no socioeconomic development without strong educational system and strengthened human capital. If countries continue to lose those who are the most potent for development, we cannot expect that those furthest behind will ever reach those in the lead. This also means that countries in development cannot reach the sustainable development goals. In view of globalization, this means the failure of less developed countries is the failure of us all. Bosnia and Herzegovina has been experiencing significant immigration, with many young and educated individuals leaving the country in search of better opportunities abroad. This has led to brain drain and is impacting the socioeconomic development of the country. Also, the fertility rate in BNH is below the replacement level, standing at about 1.3 children per woman, what combined with other demographic trends leads to enormous challenges for BNH. Here, we would like to plead for member states to engage in strengthening human capital through enabling access to adequate healthcare services to all in line with their needs and with focus on those furthest behind. Furthermore, we would like to plead that all member states invest and promote lifelong learning for all. In times of population aging and shrinking youth population, it is very important that all citizens equally contribute to socioeconomic development in line with their potential and human rights. Lifelong learning needs to be adjusted to skills and potentials of different population groups based on their age. In conclusion, here are key lessons learned from BNH. Prioritize investing in human capital across diverse demographics. Provide equitable education, emphasizing digital skills for older individuals, women and girls. Foster collaboration between public and private sectors to develop dual education systems that meet current labor market needs. Actively involve youth in creating supportive structures that foster their development and empowerment. Today's discussion showed that no single entity can tackle these challenges alone. Only through our joint effort we can overcome obstacles and reach our goals. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now I give the floor to the representative of ACT Alliance, followed by Cuba and Indonesia. ACT Alliance, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me this opportunity. I'm representing the ACT Alliance, a global right-based alliance who are working to implement the ICPD plan of action, including SRHR. As a medical doctor in my context in Tanzania, I see daily how the implementation of ICPD plan of action is actually the matter of life and death for many. And in the face of global challenges and crises during pandemic, conflicts, food insecurity, and climate crisis, the faith-based actors are often working as first respondents within the communities to strengthen capacity, advocates for justice, and access to services to most marginalized people, including women, adolescents, and children. As it is put by Sanetla, one of your panelists, on complementing, I see faith-based actors going an extra mile towards complementing the services and ICPD plan of action. In the rural and remote areas, for example, the faith actors are often the only people available to provide access to life-saving services, including being peace mediators, providing education, and health services, including reproductive and maternal health, just to mention a few. The good example during the recent COVID-19 pandemic, in my setting, the faith actors collaborated significantly with the health sector, communicating the health messages, addressing the myth and misconception about the pandemic, advocating for access to vaccines, and of course, the endorsement of provision of clinical services. These were indeed life-saving, and they complement hugely the government efforts. We recognize the important role faith leaders have within our communities to transform social norms, which hinders women and girls' access to human rights and the full implementation of the ICPD program of action. Mr. Chair, my question here, how can we enable the right-based partnership that include faith-based actors and the youth movements to advance the implementation of the ICPD plan of action? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of ACT Alliance. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba, followed by Indonesia and Nigeria. Cuba, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Bueno, ante todo, reconocer las 4 intervenciones de los panelistas por su solidez y coherencia y por la información que nos han aportado. A la pregunta decisiva de cómo podemos, de manera determinante, acelerar el cumplimiento del programa de acción del Cairo, incluyendo en mi región su concreción y desarrollo en la plataforma del Consenso de Montevideo y su contribución al seguimiento y examen de la Agenda 2030, precisamos. Primero, quedan 6 años para el cumplimiento de esa agenda que aprobamos en el 2015 y que, encadenando resultados de reuniones y conferencias recientemente celebradas, hace 2 semanas en la sede de la Comisión Económica para América Latina y el Caribe, la CEPAL de Chile, se celebró la 7ª Conferencia Regional sobre Desarrollo Sostenible, y ahí el secretario ejecutivo de esta organización internacional da una información realista y amenazante a la agenda, al cumplimiento de la Agenda de América Latina y el Caribe, cuando señalaba que solo el 22% de los indicadores ODS tienen posibilidad de cumplimiento en el 2030. Un 46% estaban encaminados, pero su cumplimiento era incierto y el restante definitivamente no se cumpliría. Pregunto, ¿será necesario a partir de estas realidades una agenda post-2030? ¿Seguirán presentes las desigualdades que se expresó en el panel, que ya existen y las emergentes en el mundo a pesar de avances? Es menos seguro que en el 1994 y económicamente menos viable y sostenible. Un ejemplo para finalizar, es cierto que se ha disminuido la pobreza en estos últimos 30 años desde la aprobación del programa del Cairo, pero han aumentado las desigualdades. Es eso, que se expresa en que lo que más tienen, cada día tienen más, y por el contrario, lo que como nos llaman los del sur, cada día tenemos menos, pero somos más. Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba. Now I would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia, followed by Nigeria and Gambia. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to deliver my comments and questions as Deputy of Social Culture Affairs and Community Empowerment at Nusantara Capital Authority. Moving Indonesian capital city from Jakarta to East Kalimantan is part of Indonesian urbanization effort. By strengthening equality on development and people's welfare. Therefore, we are committed to build a new smart forest city with zero emission of carbon and sustainable capital city for the people in the city and for the world. We understand that it requires tremendous work, not only to build infrastructures, but also to establish living environment for its population. We keep in mind the importance of maintaining the right rate of population density, targeting to have estimate population of 2 million people in the new capital city until 2045, with an area of 252 million hectares. Among others, family welfare, maternal health, youth and women empowerment, disabilities, and employment. Having these challenges in mind, we know that government cannot work alone. I myself am working with multi-stakeholders in the development of the new capital city, mainly civil society, private sector, academia, and international organizations. For example, in financing, we focus to increase the investment to achieve 80% of total budget needed and 20% of national budget. Now, allow me to ask questions to all panelists. From your experiences, how do you think the United Nations can support multi-stakeholders partnership to ensure that population agenda is mainstream in all sectors? We look forward to learning from you inside. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Indonesia. Now I give the floor to distinguished representative of Nigeria, followed by Gambia. Nigeria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also want to thank the panelists for very insightful presentation this morning. Before I proceed, I would like to remind everyone that the largest population of young people are located in Africa. 60% of our population are under the age of 25. So one of the issues I want to draw attention and request for the panelists to respond to is that the only thing that unites young people across the world is their age. After that, young people are located in different geographic locations, are experiencing different confrontation, and are under different leadership, culture, religious issues. That makes it that one-size policy, intervention, strategy cannot address the needs of the young people around the world. So my question to the panelists and probably to the United Nations is, in going forward with the implementation of the ICPD program of action after 30 years, how do we come up with policies, strategies, interventions that will address the differences of the things that young people around the world encounter? I would like to draw attention to Nigeria. Our young people are exposed to insecurity, conflict attacks. And that has brought problem in girls going to school. A lot of our girls, particularly in the north, are afraid to go to school because on their way to school, they'll be kidnapped, they'll be abducted from their school, and that has brought a setback in education of young people. So how do we address the differences in the needs of young people across the world going further? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Nigeria. Now I would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Gambia, followed by Costa Rica. And we already have the speaking requests from United States and Ghana and Advocates for Youth, Malawi and Egypt. And we already closed a speaking list, but we would like to go through all the speaking list from the member states. And after that, we would like to give the floor to the panelists for each comment from the panelists. So now I would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Gambia. You have the floor.
Very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank the distinguished panelists for the important deliberations. My comment has to do with the AU roadmap for reaping the demographic dividend, which one of the panelists talked about. The AU roadmap is a very important tool or strategy for achieving the goals of the ICPD and the SGDs. And we all know that this was put in place in 2017. And now we're 7 years down the line. Are we making any progress? My sister from Nigeria just said that we have the youngest population, but this is a window of opportunity that is not going to last forever. For instance, in the Gambia, what we have done is that we have updated the demographic dividend profile of the country with support from the World Bank and technical support from UNFPA. And we have also developed what we call demographic dividend monitoring tools, which are aligned to the 4 pillars of the AU for reaping the demographic dividend. And we're also working on having what is called a demographic dividend sensitive budgeting, which is going to guide the government to make the right investments when it comes to harnessing the demographic dividend. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, I would like to re-echo the sentiments of a friend who said yesterday that we've been implementing the AU roadmap for reaping the demographic dividend, and now we have gone 7 years. Are we making any progress? We really need to, AU needs to have a review of the AU roadmap for reaping the demographic dividend for us to know where we are as African countries when it comes to harnessing the demographic dividend. Like I said, it's a potential. When it comes to the Gambia, it's going to peak in 2035 and the window will close in 2050. So we really have to act now as African countries if we are really very serious about harnessing the demographic dividend. And by acting right now, we're also working towards the goals of the ICPD and also the SGDs as well as Agenda 2063. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Gambia. Now I give the floor to the representative of Costa Rica, followed by United States. Costa Rica, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Si bien es cierto, en estos 30 años hemos avanzado con paso firme, es el momento de acelerarlo. Y es que necesitamos hoy acciones concretas que nos transformen realmente la vida de esas mujeres cuando tomamos la decisión de colocarlas en el centro de la política pública. Necesitamos además que el uso de la tecnología sea una constante, sobre todo en el manejo y la gestión de los datos que nos permitan tomar decisiones precisas, oportunas y dirigidas específicamente a atacar estos problemas que siguen en aumento. En este sentido, la recopilación, el almacenamiento, la validación, así como la garantía de la disponibilidad y el control de su uso y acceso para la protección y seguridad de los mismos es fundamental. Y tercero, necesitamos esa cooperación y las alianzas para el reconocimiento de esta necesidad de seguir avanzando en que ese horizonte que cada vez está más cercano tiene que tener una visión o una mirada a la adaptación demográfica junto con la climática, hoy más que nunca. Y quiero cerrar con un mensaje que había dado temprano en esta conferencia, y es que no olvidemos todos estos avances alcanzados, pero no podemos dejar de lado tantos desafíos pendientes. Hay que acelerarlos, es un mandato obligatorio y vigente para esta agenda, sobre todo en la representación de tantas mujeres que hoy nos honramos nosotros de estar acá con su voz. Hoy más que nunca esta ambición por ese mejor futuro nos demanda ser muy valientes. Muchas gracias.
I thank the representative of Costa Rica, and now I give the floor to the representative of the United States, followed by Ghana. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates and panelists, we welcome this thematic session to discuss how we work to advance sexual and reproductive health and rights, social and emotional well-being, and safe and supportive environments for all individuals, including adolescents. I deeply appreciate how our distinguished panelists each delivered interventions that highlighted that if we're going to advance the agency, health, and well-being of women and girls and all of their diversity, we cannot approach our efforts as if this is a singular point-in-time crisis or as a health condition to be managed, all while managing to reinforce that sexual and reproductive health and rights are a cornerstone for the vision that we seek. We all need to take a comprehensive life course approach that recognizes our work is not done until we address all facets of health and well-being. There are a number of complex factors, from healthcare access and quality, to education, to social and community context, to economic stability that are necessary for health and well-being. And we also know, as many of the panelists highlighted, that climate change is exacerbating many of the challenges that we see. In the United States, addressing these social determinants of health is one of 3 key priorities within Healthy People 2030, which sets data-driven national objectives to improve health and well-being over the next decade. As we prioritize the unfinished agenda, we recognize the responsibility to take a comprehensive approach, and that we have to think about it not only about individuals and about reproductive rights, but how we think about the social policies that support people's agency and decision-making, right? We cannot just talk about supporting young people without thinking about what it means to be a family, what you need in terms of paid leave if you're parenting, how we work to ensure that we are able to make ends meet. And I think what I'm taking away from this dialogue, which is most important, is that this is why representation matters. This is why we need to meaningfully engage young people, because the contexts in which we live are so complicated and are evolving so often that unless you have people at the table who can talk about their experience and their expertise, we're not going to move the needle in the way that we need to. But we are committed, and underlying all of this work is dignity, respect, and humane treatment. And I thank you all for all that you are doing, for all that we will continue to do together. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the United States. Now I give the floor to the distinguished delegates of Ghana. You have the floor.
I acknowledge the panelists and the wonderful contributions they have made. In line with the ICPD Program of Action, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Africa we want, I want to go back to the presentation by Mr. Zulu. He mentioned that unmet need for family planning is going down, teenage pregnancies are declining, which are beautiful. But then we have to look at the numbers, because declining percentages does not always translate into declining numbers. And so it is important that we look at the numbers and look at investments that we are talking about. Can we also begin to talk about savings? Because implementing reproductive health information and services actually gives savings in education, in social services, and all that. And so I would want, the first day we were asked to be bold, we were asked to have a less fear and use facts and its implications. And so can we begin to look at the facts and the implications in prioritizing reproductive health information and services vis-a-vis the savings that we would make? Because investments are key, creating jobs are important, but then what about the policies that would help us surmount those hurdles, which at times are man-made? They are not like hurricanes that we don't have any control over, but refusing to give adolescents reproductive information and services, I think is an unwanted lack of knowledge and information that we should be dealing with, not just unwanted pregnancies. And so I think we need to look at cost savings in this era. 30 years ago, as I said yesterday, My predecessor, Professor Sai, chaired the ICPD program of action, and 30 years on, I think Africa should be leading in implementation of the program of action in his honor. We haven't done that. It's not late. The next 30 years, or even before then, I think we need to be bold, take decisions, science-based priorities, so that we could at least honor the memory of Professor Sai. Thank you for the opportunity.
I thank the representative of Ghana. Now I give the floor to the representative of Advocates for Youth, followed by Malawi and Egypt. Advocates for Youth, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Aubrey Balbuena, working as a youth activist in the Philippines, advocate for youth, advocate adjunct project of Advocates for Youth. Advocates for Youth welcome this opportunity to intervene in this panel discussion at this critical moment in assessing the program of action and gaps in implementation. As young people, we too often witness decisions being made that affect our health, well-being, communities, and futures without us in the room as meaningful and full participants. While we applaud the efforts made in the last 30 years to better incorporate young people and youth voices into decision-making spaces, we know how much work remains to be done. When young people are involved, we are too often tokenized, brought into the conversation at the last minute, and not welcomed into decision-making spaces. Going forward, we wish to emphasize the need to recognize youth as full stakeholders in the work of the Commission. We hope for a Commission that welcomes youth in all our diversity, race, class, genders, sexualities, and regions. Young people have the right to accurate sexual health information to make informed decisions about our bodies and reproductive futures. To the adult allies and decision makers in the room, you have the responsibility to build effective youth-adult partnerships at all levels, including the evaluation and implementation of necessary sexual health programming and services. None of our goals can be fully achieved without the full participation of the 1.8 billion young people globally. In particular, we must accelerate the advancement of comprehensive sexuality education and the stigma-free health services for all young people. In the past month, we also saw 600 plus youth voices gather and develop a common youth action agenda. Uplifting action items for that agenda, we urge member states and decision makers to provide youth-centered, accessible, safe, gender-responsive, quality SRH services and supplies within the universal health coverage programs, including abortion access, HIV care, and modern contraceptives. Develop a legal environment that promotes sexual and reproductive rights and justice and ends harmful practices that disproportionately harm youth and young populations. Work with civil society and all stakeholders to disseminate evidence and information that fight back against stigma, discrimination, and misinformation around gender and SRHR. Ensure that provision of services is stigma-free, accessible, and integrated into public primary healthcare systems with a particular focus on building access for rural, global south, indigenous, LGBTQ+, and other youth who are too often left behind at the negotiating table. Our rights are not bargaining chip, and we must all be fully invested in the health of young people globally. Thank you so much.
I thank the representative of Advocates for Youth, and now I give the floor to the representative of Malawi, followed by Egypt. Malawi, you have the floor.
Chairperson, thank you very much. And I would also like to thank the panel for the good exchange that I've had this morning. And you would like to agree that the link between population and growth is very clear. If we don't invest in human capital, we should not expect sustainable growth and development. as we have heard in the past 2 days from delegates here, Africa has got the youthest population with a median of 18. But the question should be, what is the quality of that population? We have listened very carefully, that most of the problems that we have is, for instance, access to education, which is very low in Africa compared to the other regions. And the problems have been amplified here. Financing programs and projects in health and education has been a challenge for Africa. And that is why when we come to international forum like this one, we expect that we're coming here, to learn from the countries that have done very well in implementing their programs. But again, we're also coming here, to do an ask. And now, we are asking for assistance from those countries that can help with the technical assistance to build our institutional capacities, but as well as financing. What has been disappointing, Chairperson, is that throughout our discussion, when you compare last year and other years, it has been the same it has been the same learning, from the international community. But then, our response, to address these challenges has been a challenge. It has not been forthcoming. So we're going home, but with the disappointment that we are not seeing, the assistance that we should be getting, for instance, to build capacities in our institutions, to be able to collect data, analyze, and formulate policies and the planning. For us to do that, we need some financial resources. That has been the request since the previous IDA. We are committed to implementing the ICD program of action, but to do this, we come here with the want to learn as well as to seek if other countries can come and assist as we move forward in implementing the ICPD program. Thank you, Chairperson, for this opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Malawi, and now I give the floor to the representative of Egypt. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and very, very delighted to see you presiding over our deliberations, and thank you to the panelists. I know you're short on time, so I'll summarize my remarks to really thank the panelists, particularly Mr. Zulu, for highlighting a number of issues of priority for a number of developing countries. I will only add to what Nigeria, Gambia, Malawi, and Kenya mentioned regarding, and Mr. Zulu, of course, regarding the need for a partnership. It's not an issue of availing assistance and looking at issues through the lens of assistance only, but an investment in the future. We've spoken today about healthcare and the need to upgrade health systems. There continues to be a gap, particularly in developing countries, in research and development, in upgrading the health facilities, in confronting the brain drain. And Ms. Giorgiuli also spoke about the impacts of the migration of skills and the impact on countries of origin. When we look at healthcare and enhancing healthcare, we have to look at it collectively across the spectrum. We still have, quite frankly, disappointing numbers globally of 1.1 million deaths from hepatitis, 1.6 million deaths from tuberculosis, 250 million cases of malaria still as we speak, 1.6 billion, not even million, billion cases of neglected tropical diseases, and around 4.9 million deaths related to antimicrobial resistance. This requires immense effort, and in order to ensure that health systems are responsive to all of these challenges, we have to place the priority of upgrading health systems in developing countries as a matter of crucial importance. The second element is financing, and as different delegations mentioned here, the issue of debt continues to place immense burdens on developing countries, and it is something that is evident. Africa continues to pay more for debt servicing than on healthcare, and this does have an immense impact on the enjoyment of human rights, including the right to health. Equity is needed, and this was something recognized in the Universal Health Coverage Political Declaration. I know Ms. Fagan was quite critical of the declaration, but as much as I understand, of course, the different views, but I also would like to share that the declaration did recognize the gap and the inequity that left developing countries behind during the COVID-19 pandemic, and encouraged additional international support to local and regional manufacturing to ensure better preparedness and that this does not happen again. Once more, thank you very much to the panelists and to you, Mr. Chair, for the informative session.
I thank the distinguished representative of Egypt, and we have heard the last intervention from the floor. So I now invite the panelists to make brief concluding remarks, including your response to the comment from the representative within hopefully 2 minutes. And before that, I just want to share the kind reminder from interpreters, not only for this panel discussion, but also for the general statement, but to please deliver a statement at a speed which will facilitate interpretation. So I first invite Mr. Elia Zulu, founder and executive director of the African Institute for Development Policy, make brief closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, very, very pleased to be part of this important discussion here at ICPD at 30. The main points really I want to re-emphasize is really the issue that sustainable development is about people. We have to put people at the center of the development process. And doing that means basically understanding who these people are. So continued investment in data systems, in evidence that shows who are the vulnerable people, how many people are there, how is the population going to change, how should we plan for it, is very, very central. So as we go forward on the ICPD agenda, we need to recognize the importance of evidence in the work that we do. I think the other second point is really just to emphasize that as the world is changing, priorities will continue to change. Growing conservatism, people will be trying to reverse back the progress. We have to continue reinforcing our efforts. That's what I want to say, but let me just comment on a couple of issues that came up. I think Gambia asked the question, are we making progress in Africa on the demographic dividend? I'm actually very encouraged to hear from you that Gambia did not only do the roadmap, you have developed monitoring tools, you are now going into the budgeting, because as I said, that's really what is critical. Just saying we've put demographic dividend in our national plan without going to the operationalization level is going to be problematic. So when you ask the question about the whole Africa, I think the truth is that the evidence is mixed. Some countries are going where you are going, very few. Many are still very, very stuck, and I think it's very, very important. Your suggestion that the African Union should probably reconvene to see how countries, take stock of what has happened and reinforce what needs to happen in the next 3 years or so of the 10 years will be very, very important. But we have to go to the operationalization. A couple of other comments I think we heard from Indonesia, the comment about how do we make sure that population becomes a central part in all development sectors. I think that's really very, very central. Again, you need the evidence, but we also need capacity in integrated planning, in systems thinking, and for that to happen, we really need to build capacity within the fraternity, but also the people in the other sectors on that. But also, there's an issue about framing. Among the ICPD family, we know how to talk about family planning. We know how to talk about population and so on. Once you go to climate change spaces, they look at these issues as distractions. Even the climate change activists from the developing world, you talk about population and so on, they say, why are you trying to bring issues that look like you are blaming the victim of climate change and appearing like to mitigate climate impacts, you have to look at population and so on. So I think we need to talk about framing of these issues as well. I think we heard from both Ghana and Nigeria as well, talking about context. Yes, and Nigeria, the good thing is that the ICPD agenda set in these global platforms doesn't prescribe what countries should do. So the interventions have to be done at country level. You also know that even within Nigeria, northern Nigeria and other parts of Nigeria are very different, and we can't have one intervention. So I think it's at country level where we need to reinforce this. But just encouraged to see what the countries are doing. I think the point is we need to step up the gear because the challenges are going to mount with growing population, with changing priorities and so on. Thank you.
I thank the founder and executive director of the African Institute for Development Policy for his statement and invite Ms. Silvia Jogli, president of El Colegio de Mexico, to make brief closing remarks.
Brief closing remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bueno, en realidad me da mucho gusto la riqueza del debate y las intervenciones. Quisiera centrarme también justamente en lo que mencionó la delegación de Nigeria y en la de Albania sobre cómo yo estoy convencida que el programa de acción del Cairo es una caja de herramientas y que a pesar de la diversidad de escenarios demográficos ofrece marcos conceptuales muy potentes para poder hacer esta integración de los temas y de la agenda de población y desarrollo en diferentes sectores, ¿no? No solamente en educación y salud, que ha sido comentada mucho a lo largo de estos 2 días, sino también vinculado con la política laboral, con la política fiscal, con la política que tiene que ver con procesos de urbanización, con políticas sociales en el marco más amplio, con políticas ambientales, etcétera, y que hay aspectos, además de los que ya se mencionaron, como la interseccionalidad y como esta idea de que las desigualdades no se pueden ver aisladas, sino de manera acumulada para lograr justamente la aceleración en el objetivo de disminuirlas, como una herramienta analítica muy importante y que se puede ver considerando las diferencias nacionales e inclusive bajando a nivel subnacional. Y creo que los temas que se tocaron en varias de las presentaciones son ejemplos. La centralidad de la adolescencia como un critical window que decía la delegación de Reino Unido es algo transversal a los países, aunque tenga y responda a aspectos diferentes. La forma, por ejemplo, en que la tecnología influye ahora en esta ventana de la adolescencia es algo que compartimos. Un tema que a mí me ha parecido muy interesante en estos 2 días tiene que ver, por ejemplo, con lifelong learning, que por supuesto puede tener un significado cuando hablas de sociedades en envejecimiento, pero también es un aspecto a considerar cuando hablas del dividendo demográfico en África y hablas de una población joven que en 10 años tendrá entre 30 y 40 y que requiere mantener un lifelong learning para adaptarse a los cambios acelerados que estamos observando en el mundo del trabajo. Y finalmente, pues el otro gran ejemplo es la gobernanza global que exige el tema de la migración internacional, donde de repente aparece como un gran problema, pero en donde hay varios aspectos a desmenuzar y que cruzan con la agenda de desarrollo, población y desarrollo, como el tema de la atención a la salud de los migrantes, el tema de cómo la migración se vincula con las desigualdades de género o la atención de poblaciones específicas como la niñez y la adolescencia en movilidad. Entonces, bueno, pues creo que de ahí da mucho para cortar, pero son ejemplos a manera de cortes analíticos. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Muchas gracias. And I thank the president of the El Colegio de Mexico for her statement. And now invite Ms. Shiba Sanentlan, Executive Director of the Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women, to make brief closing remarks. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kita. And I think that, we had such a great discussion. I would like to, especially, look at the comment and the question posed by the Indonesian delegate about multi-stakeholder partnerships in advancing population and development agenda. And I think that when we talk about multi-stakeholder partnerships, it's really important to recognize the role of civil society and NGOs in being able to help advance the population and development agenda. In too many countries across the world, the space for civil societies and NGOs to kind of operate has become increasingly limited, and I think that one of the things that I would really appreciate is governments around the table to actually allow civil society and NGOs to be able to flourish, because both of us may work across like different aisles, but we both share, a love for our country and for a love for our people, and that needs to be recognized. And any good partnership is not always to be yes man to each other, but to be able to hold to account and question and say, what we are doing, is it the best, right, that we can do for our people? And I think that all of the challenges that we are facing today in the world actually show we have to do the hard things. You know, the time for doing the easy things and claiming the victories is over. The whole, you know, all of the complex challenges that we, you know, are facing right now, especially for young people of the world, show we need to step up and be able to rise to the challenge and do the difficult things and make the difficult decisions. Are we up for it, is what young people are asking from us. The second is, of course, you know, I really want to also talk to the comment and the question raised by the distinguished representative from Nigeria. And I was remembering that, you know, there was a time that UNFPA was actually headed by Dr. Babatunde from Nigeria. And I will never forget what he had told us. He said, if we put a young adolescent girl from Africa in the center of our programs, and we make sure that our systems, our programs are responsive to that young girl, then we will see a lot of changes, right? And that is what the ICPD program of action asks us to do. Take that marginalized person, take that marginalized woman or young person, and put them at the center of how we make our policies and how we design our systems. And then we can say, oh, well, are there differences between the global north and the global south? Indeed, because the global north, young people from the global north may seem to be more privileged. But it does not mean young people from the global south need lesser interventions for sexual and reproductive health and rights. We actually need more interventions for sexual and reproductive health and rights due to the marginalizations of both age and gender and the types of society that we are actually living in, right? Because it is our girls who are actually facing violence, whether it is like in their way to work. So our young girls are the ones who need greater comprehensive sexuality education to know when violence has been done to them, to understand consent, and to be able to hold their perpetrators of violence to account, right? So we need more affirmations around sexual and reproductive rights and bodily autonomy and bodily integrity, not less of them. Thank you.
I thank the Executive Director of the Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women for her statement, and now invite Ms. Lucy Fagan, Social Policy Officer at the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth, to make brief closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I just wanted to reflect that I feel so inspired by the conversations in this room today, because it can feel like we're not making progress. It can feel like we're backsliding. But I think from so many of the representatives I heard today, from member states, from civil society, there is still such a passion for Cairo and what it represents. And although we're struggling with some of the issues around implementation, I can already see solutions coming out. So I was really struck by this conversation of how we move from global agreements to local implementation. And I think there are really clear strategies on how we can do that. So particularly thinking for, you know, the role that these regional consensus processes and commitments can play. We have Maputo, we have, you know, all these wonderful regional processes that really start to steer what Cairo means in the context of regional realities. But then how do we bring this down to country level? So there's a real opportunity there to think about how do we interpret and translate the ICPD program of action for our communities. And for me, that really comes back to how do we co-design? How do we co-design with civil society, with communities, with young people, to make sure that actually we're addressing the right needs and we're coming up with the right solutions? How do we align our budgets and get our financing in place? Because we need that for implementation. But then also, what does accountability look like? And how do we continue to steer this beyond ICPD 25, ICPD 30, maybe ICPD 35 in another 5 years? You know, there is a real need for that multi-stakeholder partnership and monitoring that can happen at country level to ensure that actually we're making progress, we understand where things are working, where things aren't working, and we can do course correction. And then a need to really think about the evidence and the data and to disaggregate that, to think about age, to think about sex, to think about identity, and make sure that actually, you know, our interventions, our progress on ICPD is reaching our communities in all their diversity and leaving no one behind. And then I wanted to reflect just briefly on what I heard about the fiscal space, because I think this is important. I think as a community, we need to make sure that we speak beyond ICPD, that we go into spaces around financing for development and we speak to the issues of transformative debt restructuring, tax justice, and really start to have the conversation about what does it mean to be able to finance and therefore to implement the ICPD program of action. So maybe this is my challenge to all of us, to go out and start to have these conversations and make sure that ICPD remains relevant in the context of so many of these other global conversations that need to be aligned to ensure that we can realize the ICPD promise and claim our rights and our choices for all. Thank you very much.
I thank the Social Policy Officer at the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth for her closing remarks. And once again, I would like to thank the panelists and delegation for their participation and contributions. You have reminded us that despite our global challenges with energy, innovation, and commitment, we can accelerate the fulfillment of the ICPD program of action and its fundamental contribution to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. This concludes the first part of our program. The Commission will momentarily continue with statements in the general discussion and item 3.1. Briefly pause the meeting to allow the podium to be rearranged. Please remain seated.
I request delegations to kindly take their seats.
Do you see well? Is this close enough? Yeah.
Kindly take your seats. I request delegations to kindly take their seats. I now invite the Commission to resume its general discussion under Agenda Item 3, entitled General Debate, and its sub-items A and B. Before giving the floor to the first speaker, I'd like to remind delegations to kindly respect the agreed time limits of 7 minutes for delegations speaking on behalf of groups and 5 minutes for member states speaking in their national capacity. I thank you for your understanding and cooperation. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Vanuatu on behalf of Pacific Islands developing states. You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Pacific Small Island Developing States represented here at the United Nations. All protocols observed. Mr. Chair, the ICPD Program of Action provides an invaluable framework to guide member states in promoting human development by underscoring the interrelationship between development policies and programs, human rights, and economic and social development. In 2022, Pacific leaders adopted the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific, strongly committing to the health, well-being, human rights, and equity. In this connection, the PCIDS is renewing our collective commitment to the ICPD Program of Action. Mr. Chair, concerns of the 1994 Population Conference, a Pacific Ministerial Conference in 1993, adopted the Villa Declaration setting out the Pacific Common Position. Among those common positions is the conservation and preservation of the environment as essential for human beings to enjoy a productive and healthy life. The Secretary General highlighted in the report that since 1994, threats to environmental sustainability have become the existential crisis of our time, undermining livelihoods, food security, and increasing the vulnerability of the population living in the areas affected by climate change. The population of the Pacific are particularly vulnerable to the adverse impacts of climate change, including inter alia erratic precipitation, increasingly frequent and extreme weather phenomena, more frequent and severe tropical cyclones, floods and drought, diminishing freshwater resources, desertification, coastal erosion, land degradation, and sea level rise. Positioning and discussing PCIDS within the Asia-Pacific region is always a challenge due to the diversity and vast differences in the Asia-Pacific region. The estimated population in Asia-Pacific in 2023 is 4.7 billion people, of which 12 million people are from PCIDS. PCIDS are among those that contribute the least to global climate change, but are among those that both suffer the most and have the least capacity to adapt. PCIDS are concerned with the report by the SG indicating the Asia-Pacific region contributes significantly to climate change. PCIDS wishes to put on record that as a sub-region of the Asia-Pacific, PCIDS are the least contributors to climate change. PCIDS have made progress in implementing the ICPD Program of Action, although the rate and breadth of this progress has varied between countries. Majority of the PCIDS have developed population policies and action plans. PCIDS have improving health sectors, however, a number of challenges continue to be experienced, including funding constraints, health infrastructure, and workforce shortages, in particular medical specialists, including midwives, screening services, and specialized equipment, as well as geographical remoteness and access for rural and outer communities. The recent COVID-19 pandemic highlighted our fragile health sector, disrupted our health system, and impacted our community and economy. We recognize that gender equality and women's empowerment and the full realization of human rights for women and girls have a transformative and multiplier effect on sustainable development, and are a driver of economic growth in small island developing states. Majority of the PCs have included in their national development plans or policies on gender equality and women's empowerment, including social inclusion or women's participation and equality. Some PCs members have specific gender equality, rights or empowerment policy or plans. Central to the monitoring trends and tracking progress across all aspects of social and economic development are data and statistics. PCs have been calling for more and better data and statistics quality for several years now. Strengthening data collection, accessing reliable, timely and real data to measure progress are critical in achieving the promises of the ICPD Program of Action and the 2030 Agenda. To conclude, PCs is aware that more is needed to be done, and after 3 decades of implementation, PCs and other seats still remain a special case for sustainable development. In this connection, the PCs are reiterating the call by the UN Secretary General for multilateral cooperation is needed even more than before to tackle development issues in an increasingly interconnected and interdependent world. I thank you, Chair. And I will submit, due to interest of time, the full version of this, including script of my national statement. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Vanuatu on behalf of Pacific Small Islands Developing States. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mahamat Asoyuti Abakar, Minister of the Economy, Planning, and International Cooperation, the distinguished representative of Chad.
Thank you, Chair. Madame la Présidente de la 57e session de la Commission de développement et de la population développement, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs de délégation, chers ministres, chers collègues, Madame la Vice-présidente, Madame la Vice-secrétaire générale des Nations Unies, Madame la directrice exécutive du Fonds des Nations Unies pour la population, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers délégués, c'est avec un grand plaisir pour moi de prendre part à cette 57e session de la CPD au nom du gouvernement du Tchad. Et permettez-moi de féliciter la présidente pour sa bonne direction de cette rencontre et remercier les Nations Unies à travers l'UNFPA pour l'invitation à cette importante revue de la population et du développement. Je voudrais aussi vous féliciter, Monsieur le Président, pour le rapport du secrétaire général des Nations Unies qui nous permet d'avoir une vue globale de l'état d'avancement de la mise en œuvre du programme d'action de la conférence internationale sur la population et le développement. Monsieur le Président, comme vous l'avez constaté, ma présence à New York aujourd'hui, malgré l'actualité politique dans notre pays, démontre à suffisance l'importance que le Tchad accorde à cette question importante de développement, de population et de développement. Le Tchad, avec une superficie de plus d'1,2 million de km² et une population de plus de 18 millions d'habitants, fait face à de nombreux défis en termes de développement et de population. Nous sommes conscients de ces défis et qui nous interpellent au plus haut niveau de l'État, et les actions sont entreprises pour faire face à ces défis. Depuis ces dernières années, 3 processus ont été engagés dans la transformation de notre capital humain et confirment que la question du dividende démographique est en marche au Tchad. Premièrement, sous l'impulsion de Son Excellence le général Mohamed Idriss Déby Itno, président de transition, président de la République, la transition politique a été engagée depuis 2021, a permis au Tchad de respecter ses engagements internationaux et nationaux pour un retour apaisé et inclusif à l'ordre constitutionnel. L'accord de Doha, le dialogue national inclusif et souverain, l'accord de Kinshasa, le référendum constitutionnel et finalement la tenue prochaine, d'ici quelques jours, des élections présidentielles le 6 mai au Tchad, nous permettent de poser les jalons pour un développement économique et social de notre pays. Deuxièmement, le maintien de l'équilibre sécuritaire, garant de la paix dans la sous-région, est un gage de développement du Tchad et aussi garant du développement de la population et de l'habitat au Tchad. Troisièmement, le Tchad est un refuge et la terre d'asile pour plus de 1 million de réfugiés venant des pays voisins, notamment du Soudan, de la RCA, du Cameroun et de la Libye, et qui se sont accumulés depuis le mois d'avril 2023, plus de 400 000 réfugiés fuyant la guerre du Soudan. Ces actions que nous avons réalisées dans des conditions difficiles, dans la plus grande maturité et la sagesse, avec une vision claire et pacifique, proviennent d'une jeunesse tchadienne consciente et désireuse de bâtir un présent et un futur à la hauteur des aspirations de notre population. Mesdames et messieurs, dit simplement, la population tchadienne et particulièrement sa jeunesse aspire à une amélioration de ses conditions de vie dans la paix et le développement. Elle veut une vie sans menace sur son intégrité territoriale et sa sécurité. La jeunesse tchadienne veut une meilleure qualité de vie. Elle veut des services sociaux de base dignes avec un accès à l'énergie, à l'eau, à la santé, l'éducation et un climat propice aux affaires. La jeunesse veut travailler dans l'agriculture, dans l'élevage, le tourisme et l'industrie. Elle veut réduire les effets du changement climatique dans nos villages, dans nos communautés et dans nos villes. Elle veut être un fournisseur de services publics permettant au secteur privé, à la société civile et aux institutions et organisations internationales de travailler dans la cohésion sociale. La jeunesse tchadienne veut être une force de production pour le développement du Tchad et du continent. Mais comment traduire ce potentiel de la jeunesse qu'on a au Tchad en un indicateur dynamique et positif pour nous? Comment mesurer la résilience de notre jeunesse pour que cet espoir se transforme en catalyseur contraire au cadre pessimiste et négatif qui nous détermine actuellement? Le gouvernement du Tchad, à travers toutes ces initiatives que je viens de mentionner, fait des énormes efforts pour répondre aux besoins et aux engagements pris dans la déclaration d'Addis Abeba. Depuis 2021, le Tchad compte plus de 1800 centres de santé et 129 districts fonctionnels. Le pays est passé de 25 hôpitaux districts à 93 entre 2017 et 2021. Les 2 pharmacies régionales d'approvisionnement qui étaient en place il y a quelques années sont passées à 18. De 2015 à 2021, le nombre d'écoles construites au Tchad est passé de 9 000 à plus de 11 000, soit une hausse de 20%. En 2022, le Tchad a lancé le projet 50 000 emplois pour les jeunes, créant au moins 2100 emplois. La promotion de l'entrepreneuriat des jeunes est lancée. De nombreuses autres initiatives sont en place et vous les trouverez transcrites dans notre rapport d'examen national que nous allons transmettre. Mesdames et messieurs, pour conclure, nous réitérons que le Tchad adhère pleinement à la déclaration commune, mais pour cela, nous voulons insister sur 2 points. L'intégration de la dimension sécuritaire, du changement climatique et de la fragilité sont des conditions préalables pour nos développements économiques. Un effort de mobilisation des financements additionnels est impératif pour la mise en œuvre de ce programme d'action et de l'agenda 2023. Finalement, permettez-moi encore une fois, au nom de son Excellence le Président de la République, le général Mohamed Idriss Déby Itno, que le Tchad mettra tout ce qui est en son pouvoir pour faire en sorte que la déclaration qui sera signée sera mise en œuvre. Merci beaucoup.
I thank the Minister of the Economy, Planning and International Cooperation of Chad, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Fernando Elicio Frey, Minister of Family, Inclusion and Social Development of Cabo Verde.
Merci. Excellences, j'ai l'honneur de me présenter devant vous pour faire part au nom du gouvernement du Cap Verde des politiques de la population et du développement qui visent essentiellement à offrir à nos citoyens un avenir digne, respectueux de leurs droits essentiels. Nous sommes conscients qu'en travaillant pour et avec les personnes, nous promouvons l'égalité des sexes et contribuons à éliminer les inégalités qui touchent principalement les femmes et par conséquent la société. À cette fin, nous avons développé un ensemble de mesures concrètes, durables et structurantes destinées à la famille capverdienne et à toutes les familles qui ont choisi les Cap Vert pour s'y installer. Ces mesures visent à fournir aux familles les conditions économiques, sociales, éducatives et de logement dont elles ont besoin pour devenir réellement autonomes. Pour cela, nous avons enregistrer les agrégats familiaux capverdiens dans le registre social unique, afin de concentrer notre action sur ceux qui ont le plus besoin, c'est-à-dire les groupes les plus vulnérables, la pauvreté extrême et la pauvreté absolue. À leur égard, nous avons élaboré et mis en œuvre des mesures telles que le revenu social d'inclusion et une soutien financier mensuel qui est associé au programme d'inclusion productive a permis de centaines de familles de sortir de la situation de vulnérabilité. Nous avons établi des tarifs sociaux pour l'eau, pour l'énergie, pour les transports et l'avenir pour l'accès à l'Internet. Le gouvernement capverdien a déjà supprimé les frais de scolarité de la première année à la 12e année. En effet, en reconnaissance de la double charge du travail qui pesait encore sur les femmes, à savoir les tâches de tous les jours et surtout la prise en charge des personnes dépendantes, nous mettons en œuvre le système national de soins qui a créé une nouvelle catégorie professionnelle dans le pays, celle des aidants, mais qui s'engage également à augmenter les structures de soutien afin qu'elles puissent se libérer et investir dans leur formation et ou entrer tout rester sur le marché du travail. Nous reconnaissons la nécessité d'accélérer le rythme et nous sommes déterminés à être un pays modèle, comme nous l'avons été dans notre région pour la promotion d'égalité et de l'équité. Grâce au soutien de nos partenaires tels que le système des Nations Unies, nous voulons faire plus et nous sommes engagés publiquement à éradiquer l'extrême pauvreté et à réduire la pauvreté absolue dans notre pays ici à 2026. À cet effet, nous avons élaboré et travaillons actuellement sur une stratégie nationale pour l'éradication de l'extrême pauvreté, qui représente un investissement considérable dans le développement du capital humain, en particulier pour les groupes qui risquent d'être laissés pour compte, notamment les femmes et les enfants. L'engagement pour le développement du capital humain, en gardant l'esprit que le développement est fait par les gens et pour les gens, qui est le principal acteur devant être équipé de compétences nécessaires et fondamentales afin que le capital humain puisse être le principal protagoniste à tout moment. La viabilité de cette stratégie est basée sur l'opérationnalisation d'un fonds qui s'appuie sur le tourisme national, les fonds de maïs, qui est soutenu par un pourcentage de la tâche touristique prévalait sur tous les touristes que nous visitons chaque année. Conscient que, comme dans tout le monde, le visage de la pauvreté dans notre pays est féminin, nous développons un plan national d'égalité des genres, mis en œuvre par l'Institut capverdien pour l'égalité et l'équité des genres, visant à promouvoir l'autonomie des individus, en particulier des femmes, dans les trois principaux domaines, économique, corporel et décisionnel. Nous sommes engagés dans l'autonomisation des femmes en les soutenant dans le développement d'activités génératrices de revenus, indépendamment de leur formation initiale, en contribuant à la formation des commerces, en garantissant la protection sociale et en luttant contre l'informalité. Rien ne donne plus de pouvoir à une femme et à une société que l'autonomie sexuelle et reproductive. C'est pourquoi nous, constamment, travaillons pour garantir que la maternité sans risque soit une réalité dans notre pays. Avec 76% de la population couverte en termes de santé reproductive, maternelle et infantile, et 99% des femmes bénéficiant de soins prénatals et accouchant dans toutes les unités de santé, avec le taux de mortalité néonatale et de mortalité infantile à 11,6 pour 1000 naissances vivantes. Notre pays s'est doté d'une loi consistante et spéciale contre la violence basée sur le genre, qui prévoit des mesures de prévention, d'assistance et de lutte contre cette tragédie qui affecte nos sociétés et qui est de manière incompréhensible a fait de nombreuses victimes, hommes et femmes, et détruire des milliards de familles. Nous disposons également d'une loi sur la parité qui a contribué à augmenter la présence des femmes non seulement au niveau politique, mais aussi au poste de décision. C'est avec ces engagements que nous voulons faire du Cap-Vert un pays qui valorise sa seule ressource naturelle, les personnes. C'est en valorisant et intégrant notre capital humain que nous devrions un pays développé. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
I thank the Minister of Family, Inclusion and Social Development of Cabo Verde, and I will now give the floor to His Excellency Esrom Yosef Emmanuel, Assistant Minister for Finance, Strategic Planning, National Development and Statistics.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Bulvinaka and greetings from Fiji. Mr. Chair, I have the honor to renew and reaffirm Fiji's commitment to the ICPD Program of Action. Full implementation of the ICPD Program of Action is a priority, also ensuring that our development strategies are inclusive and people-centered. The population of Fiji increased from around 790,000 in 1994 to an estimate of 930,000 by 2022. The demographic shift in Fiji, with approximately 62% of the population now below age 34 years, present a significant opportunity. The large youth cohort presents tremendous potential to fuel Fiji's economic advantage through targeted investments in their health, education, employability, and leadership capabilities. Celebrating 30 years of ICPD Program of Action implementation prompts Fiji to assess achievements and areas needing enhancement. This aligns with the coalition government's formulation of new National Development Plan for 3, 5, and 20 years, emphasizing a people-centered approach. Concurrently, Fiji is crafting an inclusive national population policy for sustainable growth and development, in line of the demographic shift towards a younger population and a growing aging population as well. Mr. Chair, Fiji is progressing well in terms of universal health coverage through the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of care. This structure ensures that healthcare services are delivered at various levels with a focus on prevention, treatment, and specialized care. As we near the halfway mark of SDG, Fiji is concerned over the escalating prevalence of non-communicable diseases, NCDs. Fiji aims to tackle this issue through advocacy, education, community interventions, and policy measures by promoting healthy lifestyles behavior. Fiji aims to enhance the population overall health and well-being by ultimately mitigating the impact of NCDs. We are pleased to celebrate Fiji's significant progress in reducing maternal mortality ratio, with figures falling below the global average. The maternal mortality ratio has reduced from 59.47 per 100,000 live births in 2012 to 35.6 in 2017. However, the high outmigration of skilled midwives is a risk to the gains we have made in the SDG target to reduce the maternal mortality ratio. Access to quality sexual and reproductive health services is essential for individuals' well-being throughout their lives. Ensuring that these services are provided with respect for dignity and human rights without discrimination or judgment promotes rights and choices for all and leads to positive health outcomes. With support from the transformative agenda funded by Australia, Fiji has made progress in achieving universal access to quality reproductive health services, including family planning and counseling. Efforts also include digitalization, support supervision for SRHR services. The Ministry of Health's recent commitment to a dedicated budget line for procuring family planning commodities signifies a step towards sustainable, universal access to SRHR in Fiji. We are also pleased to have the reproductive, maternal, newborn, child, and adolescent health policy. Mr. Chair, Fiji has made good progress as well in advancing gender equality, women's empowerment, and social protection since the adoption of the ICPD Program of Action in 1994. Mr. Chair, Fiji has taken proactive steps to promote gender equality and protect the rights of women, girls, children, and vulnerable population. In June 2023, Fiji launched the National Action Plan to Prevent Violence Against All Women and Girls 2023 to 2028. The plan focuses on dismantling patriarchal culture and gender inequality across all sectors of the society. A significant step forward for Fiji is in addressing technology-facilitated gender-based violence. With increasing reliance on digital platforms and technologies, it is essential to adapt legislation and policies to effectively tackle the new challenges that arise, such as online harassment, cyberbullying, and digital stalking. By updating legislation to reflect the realities of the digital age, Fiji can enhance its effort to prevent and respond to DFGBV effectively. The Ministry of Women, Children, and Social Protection National Action Plan Unit explores partnership with UNFPA to look into reviewing the online e-safety bill. Mr. Chair, Fiji's commitment to a young and future generation is articulated in the Fiji National Youth Policy 2023 to 2027. Fiji recognizes its large youth population is crucial for future economic development and social progress. However, Mr. Chair, Fiji is experiencing skill loss as a significant short-term challenge and the threat to economic growth. This migration is driven by the pursuit of better opportunities, including in healthcare and education, which Fiji currently struggles to provide. Mr. Chair, Fiji's greatest challenge is climate change, as with other Pacific Island countries. It threatens our security, livelihoods, and traditional social structures. Island communities bear the brunt of this crisis daily. Fiji has been actively adopting adaptive measures, including cultivating climate-resilient crops and implementing the National Adaptation Plan. Mr. Chair, essentially, data and information carry powerful and convincing justification to make real change in the lives of every Fijian. We need to bring data into evidence-based policy making and development planning. Good administrative records and vital statistics will produce data that can be analyzed and used to formulate policies and track the success of development initiatives. Mr. Chair, Fiji is committed to regional solidarity and inclusive development in line with our National Development Plan and the 2050 Strategy for the Blue Pacific. Fiji calls on global leaders, development partners, and donors to collaborate in creating economic conditions that enable everyone to thrive and fulfill their potential. Fiji is committed to realizing the unfinished business of the ICPD. With the continued support of our partners, we have hope for positive, transformative changes ahead. Vinakavagalevu, and thank you, Chair.
I thank the Assistant Minister for Finance, Strategic Planning, National Development and Statistics of Fiji, and I now give the floor to Ms. Reiko Hayashi, Director General of National Institute of Population and Social Security Research of Japan.
Esteemed delegates, as we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the International Conference on Population and Development, it is a privilege for Japan to serve as Vice Chair of the 57th session of the Commission for Population and Development. I extend my gratitude to Ms. Noemi Espinosa Madrid, Ambassador of Honduras, for her exceptional leadership as chairperson of this session. The global population is estimated to have surpassed 8 billion people as of November 2022, and is projected to reach approximately 10 billion by the 2080s. Thereafter, the UN World Population Prospects 2022 indicates a decline in global population starting from around 2087. These demographic shifts will have profound implications for every region and nations. Accurately understanding and forecasting demographic changes are imperative for sustainable development. Governments worldwide must navigate these shifts adeptly in order to chart paths towards inclusive and equitable development. Japan has been a stalwart advocate for global universal health coverage, UHC, and has consistently championed efforts in the area of population and development. Drawing upon our experience, we underscore the importance of promoting healthy and active aging and achieving UHC across various international platforms. To achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, health systems must effectively address a myriad of health challenges, including infectious diseases, non-communicable diseases, and healthy and active aging. As one of the world's most hyper-age societies with a declining population, Japan is particularly committed to tackling demographic challenges and continuously reforming our health systems so that they will remain sustainable into the future. Japan experiences unprecedented decline in fertility. Thus, period until 2030 is the last chance to reverse the trend. Last December, the Cabinet approved the Future Strategy for Children to realize a society in which younger generation can marry when they want, everyone can have children when they want, and children can have hope for the future. Recently, parliamentarians meeting on ICPD 30, Leaving No One Behind in Aging World, was held in Tokyo, convening parliamentarians from the Arab and Asian regions to deliberate on these pressing issues. Additionally, we are honored to co-host the ICPD 30 Global Dialogue, Demographic Diversity and Sustainable Development in Bangladesh next May. As we approach to the 30th anniversary of the ICPD, Japan, in collaboration with the UNFPA and partners, seeks to lead global discussions on population and sustainable development. In conclusion, Japan remains steadfast in leveraging its expertise and partnership to address the complex intersections of population dynamics and development. As we navigate the demographic landscape of a world with over 8 billion inhabitants, let us work collaboratively towards a future where demographic diversity is celebrated and sustainable development is realized for all. Thank you.
I thank the Director General of National Institute of Population and Social Security Research of Japan, and now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Paraguay.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Un gran saludo de parte del gobierno del Paraguay. Mi delegación manifiesta su complacencia por asistir a este periodo de sesiones en que, con ocasión del 30 aniversario del programa de acción del Cairo, nos reunimos para reflexionar conjuntamente sobre su estado de implementación, sobre lo que hemos progresado, lo que aún nos falta y lo que deberíamos hacer para seguir avanzando. En ese sentido, agradecemos los informes del secretario general, que constituyen un importantísimo diagnóstico sobre los logros que hemos alcanzado, así como sobre los desafíos persistentes y emergentes en este ámbito. Dicho diagnóstico nos ayuda a poner en valor las acciones realizadas, pero por sobre todo a identificar aquellos aspectos en los que debemos seguir intensificando esfuerzos. Distinguidos delegados, las desigualdades y asimetrías dentro y entre nuestros países, agudizadas con la pandemia, las crisis económicas, climáticas, ambientales y migratorias, también las dinámicas demográficas y los conflictos internacionales, constituyen retos extraordinarios que requieren esfuerzos colectivos y nos desafían como comunidad internacional, manteniendo vigentes las motivaciones del programa de acción del Cairo, tanto o más que hace 30 años. Para el gobierno de Paraguay es prioritario incrementar la cobertura y el acceso a servicios de calidad, para toda la población a través del refuerzo de medidas clave para mejorar los niveles de salud física y mental, incluida también la salud sexual y reproductiva, la educación en todos sus niveles, el acceso al empleo y seguridad social, la vivienda asequible, a la alimentación, al agua y al ambiente sano, entre otros, con un foco particular en los sectores en situación de mayor vulnerabilidad. En comparación con hace 30 años, en Paraguay hemos mejorado en cuanto a servicios de salud, al acceso a la educación y promoción de los derechos de la mujer, pero es importante reconocer que queda mucho camino por recorrer. El mundo ha atestiguado sobradas muestras de que no son suficientes las acciones individuales, sino que, por el contrario, se impone la necesidad de abordajes conjuntos y participativos a través del diálogo y los esfuerzos conjuntos que prioricen a las personas como sujetos de derechos. Sin dudas, el marco general establecido en el programa de acción del Cairo constituye una senda adecuada para orientar nuestras acciones sin perder de vista las necesidades específicas según la realidad de cada país. Y en ese sentido, y concluyendo, es importante recordar que cada país tiene contextos singulares específicos y atraviesa por procesos diferentes, y ello fue contemplado en los principios generales del programa de acción del Cairo. Al hacer referencia de cada país, tiene ese derecho soberano de aplicar las recomendaciones contenidas en el programa de acción de conformidad con sus leyes nacionales y sus prioridades de desarrollo, y esa es efectivamente la perspectiva nuestra. Conforme a los desafíos y necesidades particulares, el Paraguay entiende que la implementación efectiva de los instrumentos aquí aprobados solo pueden ser comprometidos en virtud de cada legislación y la realidad de cada Estado, en base a lo cual creemos podemos seguir avanzando constructivamente en actividades conjuntas. Gracias, presidente.
I thank the distinguished representative of Paraguay, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of El Salvador.
Señor presidente, El Salvador desea celebrar la adopción de la declaración política aprobada en este periodo de sesiones en el marco del 30 aniversario de la Conferencia Internacional de Población y Desarrollo, así como el programa de acción, el cual sigue siendo un marco estratégico crucial y válido para abordar las necesidades y desafíos diferenciados de los diferentes grupos poblacionales en términos demográficos, sociales, económicos y culturales. Somos conscientes que generar una transformación estructural no es una cuestión a corto plazo. Por ello, hemos implementado nuevas estrategias para garantizar el bienestar y desarrollo integral de nuestra población en todo su ciclo de vida a través del robustecimiento del marco normativo nacional. Asimismo, contamos con el Plan de Desarrollo Social que contribuye al logro de avances sustanciales mediante el cual se priorizan a las poblaciones en situación de mayor vulnerabilidad. Contamos con una agenda digital de país como un primer paso para iniciar la transformación digital, implementando en materia educativa estrategias para la inclusión y la reducción de la brecha digital, así como la entrega de computadoras portátiles a estudiantes y docentes del sistema público, incluyendo computadoras portátiles con programas específicos de acuerdo a las necesidades de alumnos con algún tipo de discapacidad. Hemos reforzado las estrategias para la atención primaria de salud, priorizando acciones en la primera infancia y el fortalecimiento de los programas del subsistema de protección social, como la alimentación escolar y la estrategia de erradicación de pobreza. Se han dignificado y modernizado los servicios de salud, en especial las atenciones a las madres, sus bebés y sus familias, reduciendo más de un 50% la mortalidad materna, en línea con las recomendaciones de la OMS, como el corte oportuno del cordón umbilical, la promoción de la lactancia materna en la primera hora de vida, así como el contacto piel con piel y el apego entre mamá e hijo. Contamos con la Ley del Sistema Nacional Integrado de Salud, en el marco de la cual el país está ampliando y mejorando las coberturas e impactando en el estado de salud de los individuos, sus familias y su entorno comunitario a través de acciones de promoción, prevención, atención de la enfermedad y rehabilitación en el primer nivel de atención. Contamos además con la Encuesta Nacional de Salud Mental, realizada por primera vez en nuestro país y que nos permite ir avanzando en la atención de la salud mental de nuestra población. Además, se han realizado acciones a favor de la economía de los salvadoreños, como los subsidios de agua, electricidad, gasolina, así como el aumento de las pensiones y el salario mínimo. Contamos con la Política Nacional de Corresponsabilidad de los Cuidados, así como una Comisión Nacional, mediante las cuales fortalecemos acciones a favor de las mujeres, para que no deban renunciar a sus sueños y carreras en favor de las obligaciones de corresponsabilidad de los cuidados. El Salvador cuenta con programas de acceso al empleo para jóvenes y adultos mayores a través del programa Oportunidades, el programa enfocado en mujeres jefas de hogar y programas de empoderamiento económico para mujeres, así como programas de créditos especializados para mujeres emprendedoras. Señor presidente, El Salvador reafirma la responsabilidad del Estado en la garantía de los derechos humanos, por lo cual subrayamos la importancia de contar con datos estadísticos confiables para la identificación de brechas, desigualdades y requerimientos diferenciales de las poblaciones en función de sus características demográficas y sociales. Es por ello que esta semana dará inicio la elaboración del Censo de Población, sobre el cual agradecemos el acompañamiento de la Oficina de País del Fondo de Población de Naciones Unidas como socio estratégico que le brinda El Salvador. Sabemos que aún persisten desafíos a nivel nacional, regional e internacional, por lo que El Salvador reafirma su compromiso en esta agenda y en trabajar a favor del bienestar de todos los grupos poblacionales, en especial de aquellos en condiciones de vulnerabilidad. Gracias, señor presidente.
I thank the distinguished representative of El Salvador, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Мы с интересом ознакомились с подготовленными секретариатом ООН докладами, посвященными ходу выполнения программы действий. И исходим из того, что Каирская программа действий по сей день сохраняет статус главного ориентира межгосударственного сотрудничества на этом тематическом направлении. Ее реализация способствует достижению целей устойчивого развития и повестки 2030 во всей ее полноте. Для успешной работы текущей сессии, на наш взгляд, необходимо сфокусироваться на предметных и неполитизированных дискуссиях, строго придерживаясь мандата КНР. Российская Федерация стремится к формированию такой системы международных отношений, которая обеспечивала как сохранение культурно-цивилизованной самобытности, так и равные возможности развития для всех государств, независимо от их географического положения, размера территории, демографического и ресурсного потенциалов. В целях соответствия указанным критериям считаем, что система международных отношений должна быть многополярной и основываться на таких принципах, как суверенное равенство государств, уважение их права выбирать модели социального, политического и экономического устройства, невмешательство в их внутренние дела, а также отказ всех государств от навязывания другим странам своих моделей развития, идеологических и ценностных установок. В ходе общих прений на 57-й сессии комиссии хотели бы подчеркнуть важность вопросов укрепления института традиционной семьи, института брака как союза мужчины и женщины, повышение престижа материнства и отцовства, всесторонней защиты детства. Не нужно забывать о том, что с самых первых дней жизни человека семья учит, воспитывает, развивает, передает не только знания и профессиональный опыт, но и традиции, а также повышает ценность лучших нравственных устоев. Господин председатель, сегодня наблюдаются попытки разрушить нормальные человеческие ценности. Вызовом традиционной семье становится навязывание некоторыми странами деструктивных, неолиберальных идеологических установок, которые размывают вековые нормы морали и противоречат духовно-нравственным ценностям. В результате этого страдает социальная сплоченность и может происходить скрытая или явная дискриминация семьи. Мы, напротив, хотели бы сберегать и укреплять наши семейные ценности, передавать их будущим поколениям. Это безусловный выбор нашей страны. Мы верим, что традиционные ценности, так же как и стремление народов к суверенитету, подлинной свободе и справедливости, будут служить опорой многополярного мира. Процессы его формирования идут, обороты этого процесса нарастают. Очевидно следующее: если не будет традиционной семьи, то не будет и будущих поколений. Благодарю за внимание.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. Distinguished delegates, please be reminded to deliver statements at a speed that facilitates interpretation. And I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mongolia.
Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the delegation of Mongolia, I would like to extend our warm congratulations to you and other members of the Bureau on your election. Mongolia finds this year's theme very important and timely. Mr. Chair, during the 3 decades since the ICPD held in Cairo back in 1994, the world's population has grown by nearly 2.5 billion, and among them, Asia is the most populous region, with 4.7 billion people making 60% of the global population. The rapid population growth brings both opportunities and challenges for countries. It is challenging, especially for developing countries, with persistent high levels of fertility due to continuing and emerging needs to build and invest in health, education, decent employment, and other socioeconomic structures leading to sustainable development. Those challenges have been further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and digital transformations. In this regard, Mongolia actively participated in the historic conference dedicated to the 60th anniversary of the First Asian Population Conference and 10th anniversary of the adoption of the 2013 Asian and Pacific Ministerial Declaration on Population and Development that took place last year in Bangkok. At the 7th Asia-Pacific Population Development Conference, despite significant socioeconomic progress in the region, we agreed to work together to overcome emerging challenges, including shrinking workforces, population aging, environmental degradation, increased immigration, persistent inequalities, ageism, and governance problems. Mr. Chair, in 3 decades of the implementation of the ICPD, the government of Mongolia has made substantial progress through implementation of the National Policy on Population Development, as well as the National Program on Reproductive Health. Since 2000s, Mongolia's population has been growing constantly by 1 to 2%, with the average age of 27.5 years, and about 59% of Mongolians are under age 30, while over a quarter of that population is under age of 14. The population also becoming more educated and urbanized, with nearly half of people living in the capital or other provincial centers and settlements. The most recent Mongolia's long-term development policy, Vision 2050, supports sustainable population growth and fosters active and creative citizens and families. The policy has been implemented through a family-friendly policy, promotion of sustainable population growth and human development, and establishment of an evidence-based, family-friendly, efficient social security policy, which reaches citizens in the form of social insurance and social welfare. Mr. Chair, on the other hand, we are not exceptional to multi-faced challenges and transitions in population and development across regions and worldwide. For instance, the relatively young and growing population has placed both opportunities and challenges on Mongolia's economy. Moreover, according to the second voluntary national review of Mongolia presented to the UN last July, the most backward households and the population include people with disabilities, children, young adults, the elderly, internal migrants, homeless vagrants, rural households, households with the lowest standard of living, the lowest 40%, and men with low education. In Mongolia, basic social services are not equally available to households and the population, and development opportunities are uneven, mostly due to remoteness, location, education, and living standards of households and the population. Thus, Mongolia is working to implement policies aimed at reducing regional social development disparities, poverty, and inequality at the regional and local levels, promoting the rational distribution of labor resources and protecting rural communities, vulnerable social groups, and key economic sectors from the impacts of climate change. Mr. Chair, the government of Mongolia has been closely cooperating with UN agencies, particularly with UNFPA, on advancing our social development goals. The UNFPA country program document in Mongolia for the period 2023 to 2027 is well aligned with Mongolia's Vision 2050 and the government of Mongolia's 10-year development plan, New Recovery Policy, as well as the new UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for Mongolia 2023 to 2027. We are pleased that the new CPD seeks to support national efforts to accelerate the achievement of SDGs, in particular youth development as well as maternal and child health. Mr. Chair, we believe that population development is the driving force of any development. Hence, we would like to reiterate our government's strong commitment to achieve unfinished agenda of the ICPD, as well as Agenda 2030 on the sustainable development, and cooperate with bilateral and multilateral partners, civil society, and other stakeholders toward these goals. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mongolia, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Dear Chair, distinguished delegates and guests, this year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Program of Action adopted in Cairo. And there's much reason to celebrate, but from the eyes of a 20-year-old like me, there's even more need to talk about women's and girls' health and rights. Allow me, please, to share a personal story to explain. My mother came around 30 years ago to Germany from Syria when she was 16, having grown up in Iraq. Her childhood stories made me realize how privileged I am in terms of my bodily autonomy and access to health services. Even I was not born 30 years ago, but I can tell the difference to now, knowing how my mother grew up. While everyone in this room probably has quite good access to health services and information, this was not the case for my mother, and it is not still the case for many today. Take menstruation, for example. Without proper education and menstrual products, it can be scary when it starts, and some are forced to resort to unsanitary clothes because they don't know better. This knowledge gap regarding our bodies perpetuates from one generation to the next. I learned most of what I know about menstruation at school and not at home, and I think this is unacceptable. Unlike me, many women and girls face inadequate access to basic health services and education. It leads to unintended pregnancies, difficult birth infections, and other health issues. Even today, a woman dies every 2 minutes due to pregnancy or childbirth. This is unacceptable. I don't understand why I have the privilege and my mother had it not. It has been 30 years since the Cairo Program of Action was adopted. It's time to act and to finally make sexual and reproductive health and rights for all, especially for women and girls in all their diversity, a top priority worldwide.
Thank you. Ensuring fair and equal access to sexual reproductive health and rights for all requires addressing some fundamental barriers. What are such barriers? The personal story mentioned by my colleague Nareen highlights one crucial barrier: the lack of access to adequate information and education for young people about their health, sexuality, and bodily autonomy. Comprehensive sexuality education is a cornerstone to address this. It provides individuals with essential knowledge and skills that foster autonomy from a very young age. This early empowerment not only enables individuals to make informed decisions about their sexual and reproductive health and rights, it also helps them navigate societal norms to build gender-equal, respectful, and pleasurable relationships and to overcome challenges in life with confidence and agency. As members of the Youth Advisory Council for the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, we want to amplify this fundamental message. Comprehensive sexuality education is a key for young people to exercise their human rights and bodily autonomy. We need to make sure that young people get the information they need, and we need to make sure that youths are included in the decision-making processes that affect their health, their rights, and their lives. Dear Chair, we sit here before you today representing young people from all over the world, as best as we can to vigorously emphasize our key message. Only if every individual, including persons with disabilities, ethnic minorities, LGBTQI+, and other marginalized groups are enabled to lead healthy lives and make self-determined decisions over their bodies, will we be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and to create just and prosperous societies. Let's make it happen together. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representatives of Germany, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Guatemala.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Guatemala se complace en participar en este 57º periodo de sesiones de la Comisión de Población y Desarrollo. Esta sesión es el espacio ideal para mencionar que el país está presentando un cambio en el bono demográfico, compuesto por el crecimiento de la población en edad productiva, pero que está migrando en busca de mejores oportunidades. Por otro lado, la economía también presenta crecimientos por arriba del promedio regional, por lo que para nosotros como gobierno es un reto traducirlo en mejoras de condiciones de vida para los grupos más vulnerables e históricamente marginados. Para lograr estos retos, estamos trabajando para hacer eficiente el funcionamiento del sector público, impulsando un laboratorio de innovación ciudadana que busca atender a pueblos indígenas que presentan grandes brechas en indicadores sociales. Consideramos que es de gran importancia para el país actualizar la política de desarrollo social y población, incluyendo consideraciones que se ajustan a la situación demográfica actual para contribuir al desarrollo de las personas en los aspectos social, familiar, humano y su entorno, enfatizando los grupos vulnerables y la reducción de las desigualdades entre hombres y mujeres. El desarrollo de la población guatemalteca es una prioridad para la actual administración de gobierno, por lo que buscamos promover la participación de los alcaldes municipales, alcaldías indígenas y los representantes de sociedad civil como frente común para priorizar las necesidades más urgentes de las poblaciones del área rural, indígenas, afrodescendientes, mujeres, jóvenes, niñez y adultos mayores, promoviendo la lucha contra la pobreza, las desigualdades, sin distinción de sexo, género, origen étnico y condiciones socioeconómicas, a fin de mejorar la calidad de vida de las y los guatemaltecos. Reconocemos que el programa de acción es una referencia en el diseño de las políticas y programas nacionales, junto a los actores del desarrollo, la sociedad civil, el sector privado, la academia, la cooperación y los gobiernos locales. En este orden de ideas es importante destacar la política general de gobierno de la nueva administración para el periodo 2024-2028, que busca contribuir un país con pleno respeto a la naturaleza y los derechos de las generaciones presentes y futuras, una economía centrada en las personas y promover las condiciones para una producción nacional innovadora. En cuanto a educación, nos hemos propuesto lograr la cobertura de la primera infancia y el nivel medio de educación, atender las principales brechas del sistema nacional educativo desde el enfoque de igualdad y equidad, así como fortalecer la formación docente en los idiomas mayas, garífuna y xinca. En cuanto a salud, se ampliará la cobertura de servicios, incrementando la disponibilidad del primer y segundo nivel de atención, primordialmente en comunidades rurales que históricamente han sido desatendidas. Para lograr estos objetivos trabajaremos con todos los sectores para asegurarnos que estamos trabajando con todos y para todos. Reconocemos que el país ha hecho esfuerzos en mejorar indicadores importantes como la mortalidad materna, tasa de mortalidad por suicidio, proporción de partos atendidos por personal sanitario especializado, entre otros, así como mejoras en las desagregaciones estadísticas, como la que se realizó en el Censo de Población y Vivienda en 2018, logrando identificar a la población afrodescendiente, criole o afromestiza, y su mantenimiento en las distintas encuestas de hogares. Asimismo, también reconocemos que estos esfuerzos son insuficientes para lograr los objetivos que nos hemos planteado y que aún tenemos una deuda histórica con las mujeres de nuestro país y pueblos indígenas, por lo que en esta administración de gobierno trabajaremos en conjunto con ellas y ellos para lograr alcanzar los objetivos trazados y redimir el mandato que recibimos democráticamente en las urnas y que ellas y ellos valientemente defendieron en las calles durante 2023 para hacer prevalecer la democracia. Hoy también es prudente recordar que el 25 de agosto de 2013 fue aprobado en la capital de Uruguay el Consenso de Montevideo sobre población y desarrollo. Y es por esta razón que actualmente, y aunque fuera de tiempo, que dicho sea de paso, debió haber sido presentado el año pasado, Guatemala se encuentra en la ruta de preparación del informe de país sobre el avance de la implementación del Consenso de Montevideo, permitiendo con esto trazar la ruta más adecuada a seguir en armonía con la Planificación Nacional del Desarrollo, Catún Mi Guatemala 2032, para conseguir el gran objetivo que nos hemos trazado, construir un país para vivir. Muchas gracias, presidente.
I thank the distinguished representative of Guatemala. We have just heard the last speaker in the general discussion this morning. Distinguished delegates, the Commission has thus concluded its program of work for this meeting. The Commission will reconvene this afternoon at 3 p.m. in this conference room to continue the general discussion under Agenda Item 3 and its sub-items A and B. The meeting is adjourned.